Chapter 3366. When the bell of chaos appeared, it tore through the air and attracted the attention of countless experts. Judging from the direction of the chaos bell, it seems to be going to the 33 heavens. Could it be that Araki Takashi is going to fight the masters of the Four Tao? From what I know, the Brahma Ghost Mother once killed Araki Takashi's Tao partner in the lower realm. Araki Takashi is most likely here to avenge his wife. In that case, we might be able to fight him. The 5 sacred masters communicated with their divine consciousnesses. Chaos, sacred ground. The mountain elder, evil lord, and great sage of chaos also found out the direction of the chaos bell and instinctively looked at Daiyu. The first thing Suzumo did after coming out of seclusion was to kill his way to the 33 heavens to find trouble with the Brahma Ghost Mother. It was clear how important Daiyu was to him. Lin Xuanji could not help but ask when he saw the gazes of the 3 great sages. Could it be that Brother Su really went to find trouble with the Brahma Ghost Mother? The mountain elder nodded. A look of worry flashed through Daiyu's eyes. The 5 sacred masters had once brought along 5 heavenly Tao sacred artifacts. All of them returned empty-handed, and Suzumo proceeded alone. It must be even more dangerous. The great sage of chaos grimaced. There are at least 3 great sages in the 33 heavens, the Fiend Lord, the Lord of Hell, and the Brahma Ghost Mother. 1 against 3. I'm afraid this battle won't be easy. As soon as he said that, a green figure descended above the chaos sacred ground. It was Suzumo. You're back so soon? Everyone was stunned. It had not been long since the chaos bell appeared. Suzumo had already returned. The great sage of chaos was the first to react. He laughed and said, "It's fine. I'll spare that old witch's life today. There will be another chance in the future. I'll settle the score with you." In the great sage of chaos's opinion, Suzumo must have returned empty-handed. Hence he comforted him. The evil lord said, "In the 33 heavens, your suppression will be suppressed. If you want to kill the Brahma Ghost Mother, you will be able to kill her. In the future, you can lure her away." Suzumo looked around and smiled. He said, "I've made everyone wait. Ghost Mother is dead." Ah! Cries of surprise came from the crowd. The mountain elder, evil lord, and great sage of chaos were all shocked. The evil lord was well aware that it was nearly impossible for Suzumo to kill the Brahma Ghost Mother in the 33 heavens. The devil lord, the lord of hell, and the Brahma Ghost Mother were not the only 3 great sages in the 33 heavens. And Saint King Samsara, the great sage of chaos, was stunned. "You killed the Brahma Ghost Mother in such a short time?" Suzumo nodded. He then looked at Daiyu and smiled. "I still owe you a gift. Initially, I wanted to capture Ghost Mother's soul and seal it in a jade ornament for you. However, it's a pity that her soul was preserved by someone else after I killed her for her entire life. The heads were too bloody, so I didn't bring them back." Speaking of this matter, Suzumo and Daiyu recalled their reunion in the middle world and couldn't help but smile at each other. The mountain elder said, "A generation for a generation, that's fair." Suzumo returned. With everyone gathered, the hall regained its liveliness. Music rang out, toasts were exchanged, and everyone drank to their heart's content. Not long after, Suzumo's expression changed, as if he sensed something. His eyes opened and closed, and a divine light fell on the entrance of the hall. In the next moment, 5 uninvited guests appeared at the entrance of the hall. They were the 5 great sages. The 5 great sages came together, exuding a powerful aura. The noise in the hall instantly disappeared, and it became quiet. Everyone was secretly shocked, including the 5 great sages. There were a total of 9 great sages in the Chaos Hall. Even if the 9 great sages deliberately restrained themselves, the invisible aura that belonged to peak experts still brought great psychological pressure to everyone. But when they thought of the 4 great sages present, Suzumo, the mountain elder, the evil lord, and the great sage of chaos, moreover, Zimo had just killed the Brahma ghost mother, and his aura was at its peak. Even if the 5 great sages worked together, they wouldn't be able to gain any advantage. Today, everyone here is my old friend. What business do the 5 of you have for coming here uninvited? Zimo's tone was calm, but his words were not polite. The 5 great sages weren't angry when they heard that. The heavenly punishment sacred master smiled and said, "We came here for 3 things. First, we want to congratulate fellow Taoist Su for achieving the great Tao and becoming a great sage. Second, we want to congratulate fellow Taoist Su for taking revenge and killing the Brahma ghost mother. Third, we want to turn enemies into friends with fellow Taoist Su. In the future, we will work together to kill the remaining evil of the reincarnation sect and suppress the demons." Hee. The great sage of chaos laughed strangely and said, 10,000 years ago, you wanted to kill us. Now, you want to work together with us. Do you have any principles? Fellow Taoist chaotic world, you are wrong. The heavenly punishment sacred master smiled and said, before this, fellow Taoist Su had not stepped into the saint realm and was not on the same level as us. It would be ridiculous to talk about working together. Now, fellow Taoist Su has become a great sage and is on the same level as us. He is one of the strongest experts in the 3,000 worlds. Naturally, there is no need for us to kill each other. Fellow Taoists Black Tortoise, White Tiger, and Qilin used to be enemies with fellow Taoist Su. It was because of the situation, and we had no choice. The space-time sacred master cupped his fists and said in a deep voice, "There were some misunderstandings previously. I hope fellow Taoist Su will not take it to heart." The Yin-Yang sacred master said, "Fellow Taoist Su has killed the Brahma ghost mother and is already at odds with the remaining evil of the reincarnation sacred ground. Why don't you work together with us and bury the hatchet? Speaking of which, fellow Taoist Su has some fate with the Yin-Yang sacred ground. Fellow Taoist Zhu Zhao and Yu Ying were the 2 sacred spirits of the Yin-Yang sacred ground. The sacred lord of ancestral flame also said, my 2 daughters are old friends of fellow Taoist Su. If we join forces, Yaoji and Yanji can become Taoist partners with fellow Taoist Su. It will be a great story in the future." Demoness Ji spat softly and said, "My sister and I are friends with Zimo. That's our business and has nothing to do with you." Zimo did not say anything and only looked at the 5 sacred masters indifferently. The 5 sacred masters did not get any response after talking for a long time. They felt a little awkward. "Are you done talking?" It was only then that Zimo asked, "Fellow Taoist Su, what do you think?" The heaven punishment sacred master asked with a smile, "I'm not interested. Everyone, please go back." Zimo said indifferently. The smile on the heaven punishment sacred master's face did not fade, but a dark look flashed across his eyes. The other 4 sacred masters gradually stopped smiling. The heaven punishment sacred master said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Su, why don't you think about it again? There's no need to be in a hurry to reject." Zimo suddenly said, "There's something that I would like to verify with all of you. The infinite calamity is descending. How do you resolve it?" "It's simple," the heaven punishment sacred master said with a smile. "We just have to kill all living beings and clear the karma." The space-time sacred master said, "So, fellow Taoist is worried about this. We have resolved this calamity many times and are already familiar with it. Fellow Taoist, you don't have to worry." Wu Dao's original body had heard the sacred king of samsara mention this before. At that time he felt a chill. Now that he heard the confirmation from the 5 sacred masters in such a casual manner, he was truly convinced. Kill all living beings and clear the karma. Those words were filled with blood and killing. Everyone below the sage level was an ant. In their eyes, the lives of all living beings were like grass. Chapter 3367. The heaven-punishing sacred lord sensed the coldness in Zimo's eyes and explained, "Taoist Su, you might feel conflicted. but you have no choice. Once the infinite tribulation descends, the 3,000 worlds will be destroyed and all life will return to silence. Everyone in the universe will die as well, not only the saints, but even we will not be spared. The ancestral fire, sacred Lord, nodded. That's right. We're doing this to save the 3,000 worlds, preserve the spark of life, and continue our civilization. The chaotic world great sage couldn't help but laugh. For the sake of the 3,000 worlds, and then kill all life? Shouldn't the beings of all races thank us after hearing this? The evil lord said coldly, if this is the civilization of the 3,000 worlds, then we don't need it. The mountain elder sighed deeply and looked at the 5 sacred lords. What is the 3,000 worlds? Every life with flesh and blood is the true 3,000 worlds. For the 3,000 worlds, we should do it for all life in the 3,000 worlds. The chaotic world, great sage sneered. Xian Ku, you're still trying to reason with them? These people say nice things about preserving the spark of life. But to put it bluntly, they want to sacrifice all life to resolve the infinite tribulation and save their own lives. The Nirvana's sacred Lord said indifferently, when the infinite tribulation descends, everyone will die. If we kill all life first, at least we can survive. The heaven-punishing sacred Lord said, we have to pay a price if we want to resolve the infinite tribulation. It was the first time most people in the hall had heard of the infinite tribulation. Hearing the 5 sacred lords say, kill all life was so casual. It was actually so light and casual. A chill rose in his heart. They might not even be ants in the eyes of the 5 sacred lords. It was just a price to pay. There is a price to pay. Su Zimo's eyes were cold as he looked at the 5 sacred lords. But why does the price have to be all life and not you? Your lives are important, but the lives of all life aren't? The Yin-Yang sacred lord laughed. Taoist Su, you're too naive. Our lives are naturally different from all life. Fellow Taoist Su, you've already become a great sage. We're all immortal beings. How can we be compared to the myriad races? The ancestral flame, sacred master, glanced at Daiyu and suddenly said, only by resolving the immeasurable calamity of living beings can fellow Taoist Su and your Tao partner live eternally together. Ancestral fire sacred master could tell that Su Zimo cared a lot about Daiyu, even going to the 33 heavens to kill the Brahma ghost mother to avenge her. Without waiting for Su Zimo to reply, Daiyu said indifferently, if this kind of eternal life is exchanged for by sacrificing the lives of thousands of races, then it's better to die early. Daiyu's reply was even more direct. Ancestral flame, sacred master frowned. As he looked at the faces of the 5 great sacred masters, Su Zimo couldn't help but recall what sacred king Samsara had said. Only death was the greatest fairness in this world. Seeing that the 2 sides didn't agree, the heaven-punishing sacred master changed the topic. There's no need for us to argue about this. The danger in front of us isn't the immeasurable calamity of living beings. It's the demons from the reincarnation sacred ground. The evil lord and the mountain elder weren't originally from the reincarnation sacred ground. Why don't you join forces with us? With the help of fellow Taoist Su and the great sage of chaos, we can succeed. Don't count me in. The great sage of chaos rolled his eyes and said, I don't dare to join forces with you. Who knows when you'll sell me out? The mountain elder shook his head and said, our paths are different. What do you say, fellow Taoist Su? The heaven-punishing sacred master asked again. Not interested. Su Zimo's reply was still the same. The smile on the heaven-punishing sacred master's face gradually disappeared. His face gradually darkened. Araki Takashi, the heaven-punishing sacred master, said, you can achieve what you have today because of Chaos Qinglian. However, you should know that Chaos Qinglian took the wrong path more than 6 billion years ago. She died, and the chaos sacred ground was destroyed because of that. Are you threatening me? Su Zimo's eyes turned cold and murderous. The heaven-punishing, sacred master did not show any fear. He only said calmly, "It's not a threat. I'm just giving you a reminder. When it comes to that, our methods will not be able to affect the situation. This is your last chance. If you take the wrong step, you will be doomed eternally." Su Zimo looked at the 5 sacred masters expressionlessly. He slowly stood up, and a terrifying aura burst out from his body. He said, "Leave now. I won't kill you. This is your last chance." The 5 sacred masters' faces changed. Su Zimo's action of standing up gave them a huge amount of pressure. They even felt that a great disaster would befall them at any time. Fortunately, they had the 5 heavenly Tao saint artifacts to protect them. Thus, the 5 sacred masters were able to withstand the pressure and not lose their composure. The 5 sacred masters did not dare to hesitate. They turned and left. Just as they left, another figure walked in from the entrance of the main hall and brushed past the 5 great saint masters. This woman had a head of black hair and was wearing an old robe that was slightly white. She looked indifferent, and there was no emotion in her eyes. It was Saint Guyao. When Su Zimo saw the old robe that Saint Guyao was wearing, he was a little dazed. He could not help but feel a ripple in his heart. Could it be that Yao Shui? Just as this thought came to his mind, Su Zimo realized that Yao Shui's condition was a little strange. It's Yao Ji. The sacred masters saw Saint Guyao and recognized her. The Yin Yang sacred master sent a voice transmission to the ancestral flame sacred master. Why don't we let her persuade Araki Takashi? The ancestral flame sacred master looked at Saint Guyao. Saint Guyao also looked at him. However, she only took a glance before looking away. Her eyes were indifferent, as if she was looking at a stranger. There was no emotion in them. The ancestral flame sacred master sighed and shook his head. Saint Guyao came to the main hall and looked around. Her gaze swept past everyone. Lin Xuanji hurriedly stood up and greeted her with a smile. Some old friends of planet Tianhuang also stood up. However, Saint Guyao did not respond at all. She looked at them with an unfamiliar gaze and did not even pause for a moment. The old friends of planet Tianhuang were all stunned. Even Saint Guyao looked at Demoness Ji with the same gaze. She did not seem to recognize these old friends, nor could she recognize Demoness Ji. Demoness Ji looked at Saint Guyao with tears in her eyes and murmured, "Sister doesn't recognize me anymore." When the evil lord saw this, he sighed. A rare look of pity flashed across his eyes as he looked at Saint Guyao. It was rare for him to show such emotions. Saint Guyao's gaze swept across the main hall and finally landed on Su Zimo. She paused for a moment. At this moment, there was a hint of spirit in her cold and distant eyes. She recognized Su Zimo. She came today to bid farewell to Su Zimo. End of chapter. Chapter 3368. Saint Guyao had almost cut off everything and forgotten everything. Only one person and a past was left. Saint Guyao knew that when she decided to take this step, she was no longer herself. She was neither Guyao nor Yao Shui. Therefore, today, she was here not only to bid farewell to Su Zimo, but also to bid farewell to her past and that dream. Su Zimo looked at Yao Shui at the entrance of the main hall. Looking at the old clothes she was wearing, he vaguely understood something. When they were in Guyao's courtyard, Saint Guyao was rather cold to him. They were like strangers. However, Su Zimo could tell Saint Guyao's body and Yao Shui's shadow. At this moment, although Saint Guyao was wearing faded clothes, Su Zimo could feel that Yao Shui was about to leave. Yao Shui entered the main hall, but did not go forward. She only looked at Su Zimo from afar. There was an indescribable gentleness in her eyes. There was also a trace of reluctance and longing. "Congratulations." Yao Shui smiled. Dai Yu's expression was calm as she nodded. She could see the farewell in Saint Guyao's eyes. Looking at this familiar smile, Su Zimo was in a trance. It was as if he had returned to Pingyang town in Tianhuang, mainland. He recalled all the things that happened between the two of them. Yao Shui, you! Su Zimo had just opened his mouth when he saw Yao Shui smiling and shaking her head gently. Zimo, Yao Shui called out softly. Su Zimo's heart trembled when he heard that. You have to be well. Yao Shui took a deep look at Su Zimo. She turned around. The moment she turned around, all the emotions, reluctance, and longing in her eyes disappeared in an instant. The only bit of spirit in her eyes also dimmed. That pair of eyes was still very beautiful. However, it was like a pool of stagnant water without any ripples. Yao Shui's aura surged. Heaven and earth shook, and the great Tao resonated. The moment Yao Shui stepped out of the Chaos Main Hall, she became a great sage. Congratulations! The space-time Sacred Lord and the others wanted to congratulate Yao Shui. However, Yao Shui's expression was indifferent. She didn't care about the 5 great sacred masters at all. She didn't stop and soared into the sky. The ancestral flame, sacred master sighed as a look of confusion flashed across his eyes. For the first time, he began to doubt his own persistence. The 5 sacred masters also left one after another. Due to the appearance of the 5 great sacred masters, the atmosphere in the primal chaos hall was no longer the same as it was just now. Even if the 5 great holy masters were to leave, in the hearts of the crowd, he could also feel a sense of oppression. It seemed like a storm was coming. Everyone knew that this gathering could not continue. Then he got up and left. The great sage of chaos also cupped his hands and bade farewell. Not long after, there were only a few people left in the hall. Mountain Elder and Evil Lord didn't leave. After everyone left, the Evil Lord stood up and said to Su Zimo, Yao Shui's great Tao is like this. It's not because she's heartless. What great Tao does she cultivate? Su Zimo already had a vague guess in his heart, but he still asked. The Evil Lord said, Taishang indifference. Taishang indifference? Su Zimo furrowed his brows slightly. The Evil Lord said, Yao Shui uses the dream realm to experience different lives. After gaining love, she forgets love. Only then can she not be trapped by her emotions and not be disturbed by them to achieve her great Tao. After gaining love, she forgets love. This is to cut off the 7 emotions and 6 desires. Dai Yu shook her head slightly and said, Cultivating such a great Tao is a little cruel to her. Yes, the Evil Lord sighed softly and suddenly said, Actually, Yao Shui did not get involved in the great battle 6 billion years ago. Other than the relationship between the ancestral flame, sacred master, and Saint Xianpin, it was mainly because Master stopped her. Why is that? Su Zimo asked. The Evil Lord and Yao Shui's master was the Life Sacred Master. The Life Sacred Master didn't stop anyone else, but stopped Yao Shui from joining the battle. It was a little strange, the Evil Lord said, because Master has high hopes for her and is worried that something will happen to her. Master once said that the hope of resolving the infinite calamity might lie with Yao Shui. Su Zimo was confused. Yao Shui had the hope of resolving the infinite calamity? The Evil Lord said, When I heard about this back then, I was just as confused as you. Master only said one sentence. Only by forgetting love can one be fair. Only by being heartless can one be benevolent. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. He murmured softly and seemed to have understood something. The Mountain Elder suddenly said, The Life Sacred Master once said that we are not worthy of being called saints. What does that mean? Su Zimo asked. The Mountain Elder said, She said that the word saint is not just about one's cultivation realm. It also contains fairness, justice, selflessness, and benevolence. However, which saint, including me, doesn't have selfish desires? Su Zimo was deep in thought. The Evil Lord said, In reality, it is as difficult as ascending the heavens for postnatal life forms to cultivate and become a great saint. The reason why we can become great saints is mainly because of the 6 paths of reincarnation and the support of the heavenly reincarnation Tao. The reason why you can become a great saint so quickly is also because of the opportunity and inheritance of the chaos Qinglian. As for Yao Shue, she reached this stage by herself. Of course, this is indeed too cruel for her. The mountain elder said, with such commotion happening in the greater 1,000 worlds, those few are probably about to awaken. You have to be careful. Su Zimo nodded. In reality, the arrival of the 5 sacred masters this time was more like a final warning to him. The next time they came, it might not be them anymore. After saying that, the mountain elder and the evil lord stood up and bade farewell. Su Zimo and Dai Yu sent them off. When he reached the entrance of the hall, the evil lord suddenly stopped in his tracks and turned around. He frowned and looked hesitant as if he wanted to say something. This expression was extremely rare for the evil lord. "What's wrong?" Su Zimo asked. The evil lord was silent for a moment before saying slowly, "If an existence that no one can fight against is born in the trichiliocosm." At this point, the evil lord paused and shook his head. "Forget it." The evil lord turned and left halfway through his sentence. The originally bustling hall was now cold and cheerless again. "Thanks." Dai Yu looked at Su Zimo beside her and said with a smile. Su Zimo said, "It's a pity that sacred King Samsara did not manage to kill Ghost Mother completely. It's nothing. The mountain elder is right. A lifetime for a lifetime is fair." Dai Yu said, "Furthermore, I was able to reincarnate back then. Although it was the evil lord who saved me, I had to go through reincarnation. Without the consent of sacred King Samsara, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to survive." Su Zimo nodded. Dai Yu suddenly asked, "Speaking of which, in the 6 paths of reincarnation, the masters of human Tao, hungry ghost Tao, beast Tao, hell Tao, and Ashura Tao have all appeared. However, there is still one master who has yet to appear. This person has always been in the 33 heavens. I saw him this time." Su Zimo said, "If I'm not wrong, the palace master of the 33 heavens, the great sage who controls the heavenly human race, is the master of the heavenly Tao. To be precise, he should be the master of the heavenly Tao. The last Tao of the 6 paths should be the heavenly Tao, not the heavenly Tao." End of chapter. Chapter 3369. Dai Yu asked, "Although the heavenly human path is one of the 6 paths, the heavenly human path, Lord, survived the great upheaval back then. Could he have sided with the 5 sacred grounds back then?" "Perhaps." Su Zimo said, "It's also possible that this was sacred King Samsara's arrangement to leave the heavenly human path, Lord, in the boundless world as a pawn. But now, sacred King Samsara has ascended to the boundless world, and the heavenly human path, Lord, has returned." "Pawn?" Dai Yu asked, "What's the use of sacred King Samsara's move?" "I'm not sure." Su Zimo pondered and said, "I think it might have something to do with the heavenly Tao, saint weapon of the 33 heavens. There's another heavenly Tao, saint weapon in the 33 heavens?" Dai Yu said, "Sacred King Samsara's weapon." Su Zimo nodded and said, "If not, the 5 sacred lords would not have returned empty-handed with the 5 heavenly Tao, saint weapons back then. After entering the 33 heavens, be it the saint weapons or combat strength, they will be suppressed in some way." Lin Xuanji came over. He asked curiously, "An expert like the Saint King of Samsara is very powerful. How many are there in the boundless world?" "Originally there were 8. Su Zimo said, "The 6 of them were the first Taisher primordial spirits of the trichiliocosm and represented the 6 heavenly Taos. They were yin-yang, heavenly punishment, nirvana, ancestral fire, space-time, and chaos. Later on, 2 living beings cultivated to that level and established the other 2 heavenly Taos, life and samsara." Su Zimo told everyone about the Taisher primordial spirits. Everyone was enlightened. That was the origin of the 8 sacred grounds. Su Zimo said, However, in the upheaval 6 billion years ago, Chaos Qinglian and Sacred King Life died. Now, there are only 6 Sacred Kings left. Lin Xuanji frowned. The Sacred Kings behind the 5 sacred grounds will definitely join forces. Even if Sacred King Samsara returns in this generation, how will he fight against them? Zimo should have a chance of becoming a Sacred King as well. If he joins forces with Samsara, he might have a chance. Ji said. Lin Xuanji said, even so, there are only 2 Sacred Kings. According to the information we have, during the great upheaval back then, there was a huge commotion. At least the Chaos Saint King, Life Saint King, and Reincarnation Saint King were on their side. Even so, they still lost, causing 2 Saint Kings to die and the 3 sacred lands to be destroyed. In this life, I don't think we have much chance of winning in a 2 versus 5 situation. Everyone nodded. Lin Xuanji's words made sense. Suzimo said, my guess is that in that great upheaval all those years ago, although the 5 great Saint Kings did not die, they might have suffered some kind of injury that could not be healed. An injury that even the heavenly Tao, Saint King, could not heal? What about Saint King Samsara? Everyone still had many doubts in their hearts. Of course, this was only Suzimo's conjecture. Without seeing the 5 great Saint Kings, he was unable to make an accurate judgment. Dai Yu suddenly asked, will the infinite calamity of living beings threaten the heavenly Tao Sage King? Not a threat. Suzimo shook his head. Saint King Samsara had once said that there were very few who could survive the infinite tribulation. It should be referring to the few heavenly Tao Saint Kings. Dai Yu said, since that great upheaval more than 6 billion years ago was caused by the infinite calamity of living beings, why would it trigger a battle between the Saint Kings? Everyone understood what Dai Yu meant. Since the infinite calamity of living beings could not threaten the heavenly Tao Saint Kings, in that great upheaval, there was no need for the heavenly Tao Saint Kings to be involved. In fact, Suzimo also had doubts about this point. According to Saint King Samsara, the battle back then was caused by the infinite calamity of living beings. The side led by the 3,000 human saints could not bear to see the destruction of all living beings, so battle between the saints of the 5 great sacred grounds broke out. However, if the infinite calamity of living beings could not threaten the heavenly Tao Saint Kings, even if all the saints and great saints were killed, the heavenly Tao Saint Kings would not have to take action. There must be other reasons for this. Lin Xuanji asked, what is the cause of the infinite calamity of living beings? Suzimo pondered for a long time before saying slowly, according to Saint King Samsara, the root of the infinite calamity of living beings is eternal life. However, in reality, the 3,000 great Taos are eternal and indestructible. However, the existence of the 3,000 great Taos will not trigger the infinite calamity of living beings. The 3,000 great Taos each have their own laws, which will only make the 3,000 worlds more stable and prosperous. However, when the living beings of the 10,000 races merge with the Tao to become saints and become one with the Tao, it will cause the great Tao to have selfishness and greed. This selfishness and greed will definitely cause all kinds of imbalance and inequality. The bloodlines of a saint are endless and their forces are intertwined. They will occupy more and more resources, and the struggle for survival of the 10,000 races will become more and more intense. The collision of karma will give birth to many calamities of various sizes. If a saint dies, all energy will return to heaven and earth. There will be a time when the forces under him will decline, and heaven and earth will return to balance. However, these calamities cannot threaten a saint at all. As long as a saint does not die, there will be more calamities. When they accumulate to a peak, it will cause karma to collapse and the universe to become unbalanced. The infinite calamity of living beings will descend, killing everything including the saints, causing heaven and earth to return to chaos and evolve again. Lin Xuanji seemed to understand something and nodded. When things reach an extreme, they will decline. This is the most fundamental law, and also to maintain the balance of heaven and earth. However, the saints are eternal and prosper without decline, which destroys this balance. Daiyu said, no wonder the Life Saint King said that the hope of resolving the infinite calamity of living beings lies with fellow Taoist Yaoshua. That's right. Su Zimo said, Yaoshua has cultivated to the point of forgetting emotions and has already become a great saint. If she can take another step forward, she will be heartless and create a new heavenly Tao. The heavenly Tao is heartless, and heaven and earth are not benevolent. This means that there is no selfishness or greed, and all living beings in the 10,000 races look at everything with the same gaze. This should be the intention of the Life Saint King when she said that forgetting emotions is the only way to be fair and being heartless is the only way to be benevolent. Lin Xuanji murmured softly, this means that the weak ants and the powerful gods, fiends, immortals, and Buddhas are all equal under the heavenly Tao. However, how can that be achieved? Daiyu shook her head. Even if fellow Taoist Yaoshua takes another step forward and becomes a heavenly Tao Saint King, she will only be on par with a few heavenly Tao Saint Kings and will not be able to change the situation of the 3,000 worlds. Lin Xuanji added, if you want the saints to give up on their selfishness and greed, it's equivalent to asking them to give up everything they have. That's almost equivalent to going against the entire 3,000 worlds. Demonist Ji said, if we join forces with Samsara and suppress the 5 heavenly Tao Saint Kings, there's a chance. Perhaps. Su Zimo thought for a moment and said, actually, I can see some things from the legacy memories of Chaos Qinglian. Back then, Chaos Qinglian and the Life Saint King tried to find a way to resolve the infinite calamity of living beings. That was the reason why Chaos Qinglian created the universe creation diagram. Unfortunately, the universe creation diagram was born in the 3,000 worlds and can't continue evolving. End of chapter. Chapter 30, 370. At that thought, Su Zimo pondered deeply. He had not reached the level of primal Chaos Qinglian back then, and there were some memories that he could not see clearly. However, he could faintly feel that there might be more to the battle between the Sage Kings back then. Feng Cantillon asked, according to what you said, the 5 Taisha primordial spirits might have already awakened, and Sage King Samsara is making a comeback. There will definitely be a battle between them. I just don't know when this battle will erupt. The 5 Taisha primordial spirits should find me first. Su Zimo said slowly, they won't wait for me to become a Sage King before appearing. The 5 Sage Lords should be here as a final warning. Everyone's heart sank. This meant that there was not much time left for Su Zimo. The 5 grand beginning primordial spirits could come at any moment and kill Su Zimo first. If the 5 Taisha primordial spirits find you, will Sage King Samsara help? Daiyu was worried that Sage King Samsara would hold a grudge against Su Zimo because of the Brahma Ghost Mother's death and would choose to stand by and watch. Su Zimo was silent for a moment before saying, I don't know. In fact, he was not clear about the Brahma Ghost Mother's position in Sage King Samsara's heart. Logically speaking, the Brahma Ghost Mother was not only Sage King Samsara's disciple, but she also controlled one of the 6 paths. She was extremely important. However, Sage King Samsara had watched him kill the Brahma Ghost Mother in the previous battle. If Sage King Samsara did not care about the Brahma Ghost Mother at all, then he had saved her soul in the end. Moreover, the Brahma Ghost Mother did not seem to only be Sage King Samsara's disciple. Su Zimo said, even if he doesn't help, it's fine. Even if this Qinglian primordial spirit dies, there's still a chance of survival. Is your Wu Dao primordial spirit still around? Feng Cantillon could not help but ask. Su Zimo nodded. Everyone perked up. These old friends all knew about the existence of Su Zimo's Wu Dao's true body. However, ever since the War of the Heavens, Wu Dao's original body had been destroyed by the heavenly tribulation, and he had never appeared again. Everyone thought that Wu Dao's original body had already perished. What realm has Wu Dao cultivated to? Can he stand shoulder to shoulder with Taisha Yuanling? Lin Xuanji's eyes lit up as he asked hurriedly, "What realm?" Su Zimo shook his head. "I don't know. The cultivation of Wu Dao's original body was different from that of his predecessors, and there was no reference. It was completely different from the cultivation methods of the 3,000 worlds." After pondering for a moment, Su Zimo said, "Stronger than the great sage, but not at the level of the Taisha primordial spirit." After all, several chaos holy spirits had been born within the chaos verse of Wu Dao's true body. The battle prowess of Wu Dao's true body surpassed that of a supreme saint, but it was still incomparable to Taisha's primordial spirit. Taisha primordial spirit was born in an even more ancient universe. Everyone fell silent again. If they could not stand shoulder to shoulder with the Taisha primordial spirit, they would not be able to resolve this calamity. It could only be considered a slim chance of survival. Su Zimo did not explain. In fact, he was still looking forward to the arrival of the 5 Taisha primordial spirits. That was because if the chaos verse of Wu Dao's true body wanted to continue evolving and trace back to the origin of the universe, the only opportunity was with the 5 Taisha primordial spirits. Although Chaos Qinglian was also one of the 6 great Taisha primordial spirits back then, Chaos Qinglian had already fallen. Her soul had reincarnated several times, and her body was destroyed and reconstructed. Even if Su Zimo cultivated Qinglian's true body to the great sage realm, there would be no aura or traces of the era of the universe where the Taisha primordial spirits were born. As for Sacred King reincarnation, he had attained the Tao through postnatal cultivation and became a Sacred King. He did not belong to that era of the universe. Only the 5 Taisha primordial spirits could see traces of that ancient universe, search for clues, and trace back to the origin. That was the opportunity that Wu Dao's true body was waiting for. 10 days later, the sky above the greater 1,000 world changed drastically. Other than the 33 heavens that were unaffected, the other territories were shrouded in a suffocating and terrifying pressure, as if the end of the world had arrived. All races were shocked and kept quiet out of fear. Even if one's cultivation had reached the supremacy level, at that moment, they felt a fear that touched their souls. All the sages were in an uproar and felt their scalps go numb. They did not dare to act rashly. Even the sages did not know what had happened. In the 3,000 worlds, only existences at the great sage level knew what this terrifying pressure meant. Even they could not resist this kind of power. The 5 most ancient beings had appeared. In the chaos sacred land, Su Zimo slowly opened his eyes. His expression was calm as he looked up at the sky and said indifferently, "They're here." In the main hall, everyone had yet to leave. They came so quickly, even if they were mentally prepared, everyone's faces were still pale, and they were shocked. Even Daiyu, who had always been calm, subconsciously held Su Zimo's hand tightly, as if afraid that he would not return. "Chaos, come for a chat." A voice entered Su Zimo's ears. Su Zimo got up and gently squeezed Daiyu's palm. He smiled slightly, indicating for her to rest assured. Then Su Zimo turned around and looked at all his old friends in the main hall. He paused for a moment on everyone's face, as if he wanted to remember their appearance. Everyone also realized that this farewell might be the last time they saw each other. A moment later, Su Zimo took a deep breath of air and left, disappearing from sight. Above the vast 1,000 worlds, clouds and mist rolled, covering the sky and the sun. Su Zimo passed through the layers of clouds and arrived above the vast 1,000 worlds. Not far away, there stood 5 figures that were suffused with a faint halo. 2 balls of purple flames suddenly rose in Su Zimo's eyes. Wu Dao's true body used the eyes of Qinglian's true body to begin searching for traces and aura of that ancient universe on the 5 Taisha primordial spirits. When Su Zimo stared at the 5 Taisha primordial spirits, The 5 Taisher primordial spirits were also sizing him up. The Taisher primordial spirit in the middle that was suffused with a destructive aura said indifferently, "I thought you were the reincarnation of chaos. Now it seems that other than the physical body of chaos, Qinglian, you have nothing to do with chaos." Black and white chi appeared in the eyes of the leftmost Taisher primordial spirit, as if he could see through Su Zimo's future and current life. He said, "So it's just a mortal who has reached the heavens in a single step by chance and cultivated to this stage. What a pity." The Taisher primordial spirit that was surrounded by lightning murmured softly. Su Zimo could clearly feel that the 5 Taisher primordial spirits' eyes were looking at him coldly. "What's a pity?" Su Zimo asked. Wu Dao's true body was deducing. What he needed to do was to stall for time as much as possible. The Taisher primordial spirit said, "If you are the reincarnation of chaos, you are considered old friends with us. On account of our past relationship, we will give you another chance. Unfortunately, you are not." Pausing for a moment, the Taisher primordial spirit said, "That's simple. Just kill him." As soon as he finished speaking, the Taisher primordial spirit raised his hand slightly. A heavenly punishment descended from the sky and arrived instantly. Su Zimo was shocked. The Taisher primordial spirit attacked directly and did not give him any chance at all, even though Su Zimo's combat strength had already surpassed that of a great sage. Even though the Taisher primordial spirit might have been injured long ago. However, facing this heavenly punishment, Su Zimo still felt that he could not resist it. He even smelled the aura of death. This was not the power of the great Tao, but the power of the heavenly Tao. Chapter 3371. Bang! A black shadow suddenly appeared in front of Su Zimo. With a casual grab, it crushed the heavenly punishment in front of him. Sacred King Samsara had appeared. Su Zimo heaved a sigh of relief. If Sacred King Samsara had not blocked the heavenly punishment, even with the Bell of Chaos and Sacred Body of Chaos, he would not have been able to withstand 2 hits. He would definitely die. Once Qinglian's true body died, it would even affect Wu Dao's deduction process. Sacred King Samsara gently waved his hand and said, "Heavenly punishment, you are much weaker than before. It seems that your injuries will be very difficult to recover." As expected, the 5 Taisher primordial spirits were already injured. A trace of doubt suddenly rose in Su Zimo's heart. They were all heavenly Tao sacred kings. Why were the 5 Taisher primordial spirits' injuries still not healed? And Sacred King Samsara seemed to have recovered. What kind of injuries could make the 5 Taisher primordial spirits unable to recover? The Yin-Yang primordial spirit said calmly, "Chaos and life have already fallen. You alone can't do anything." The space-time primordial spirit said in a low voice, "Even if we are injured, as long as we join forces, we can still suppress the heavenly punishment." "I don't think so." "Ha ha ha ha!" Sacred King Samsara looked at the 5 Taisher primordial spirits and suddenly laughed. His shoulders shrugged, and he looked slightly deranged. The Nirvana primordial spirit said coldly, "No need to listen to him. Join forces and kill him." Boom! The Nirvana primordial spirit attacked. The power of the heavenly Tao exploded, and the entire space was filled with a destructive aura. Under the Nirvana heavenly Tao, everything would return to Nirvana and turn into dust. Smack! Sacred King Samsara casually slapped and scattered the Nirvana, heavenly Tao power that had just condensed. "There's no need to use these tricks to show off," Sacred King Samsara said with a mocking expression. The Nirvana primordial spirit's face darkened. With a single thought, a large spear brimming with murderous intent broke through the layers of clouds and mist and arrived in his palm. It was the heavenly Tao sacred artifact, the saint-slaying spear. "Everyone, don't be arrogant," the Nirvana primordial spirit said in a low voice. The 4 Taisher primordial spirits understood and put away the remaining 4 heavenly Tao saint artifacts. Noticing this commotion, the demon lord, Devapath sovereign, hell sovereign, and evil lord all appeared. They led their armies and left the 33 heavens for the first time. In a flash, in the skies above the 33 heavens, evil spirits danced wildly. Ghostly shadows flickered and banners fluttered in the wind. Killing intent overflowed to the heavens. Previously, the demon lord, the lord of hell, and the others did not dare to rashly leave the 33 heavens because of the existence of the 5 heavenly Tao saint artifacts. Now, without the threat of the heavenly Tao saint weapon, the masters of the 4 Taos had all shown up. The mountain elder led the human saints to the air above the life sacred land. Primal chaos sacred land. Zhu Zhao Yuing and Dai Yu led the experts from the chaos sacred land into the air and looked in the direction of the 5 sacred lands. In the eastern sky, an incomparably thick and sturdy staff appeared. Beside the gigantic rod, an even more massive body appeared vaguely, emitting a terrifying aura. The great sage of chaos had appeared. The great sage of chaos, who had remained neutral during the previous turmoil, was also preparing to make a move in this life. In the great thousand world, the winds and clouds surged, and the heavens and earth changed color. Azure Dragon, the demon lord's voice traveled to the 5 sacred lands. Heavenly Tao reincarnation. Did the 5 of you think this day would come? Heavenly Tao reincarnation. These 4 words seem to have a powerful magical power. The living beings in the 5 sacred lands felt waves of palpitations and unease. The 5 sacred lords' expressions were ugly. When they heard the words Heavenly Tao reincarnation, they couldn't help but recall the past. It was as if it was yesterday, and everything was still vivid in their minds. In reality, the destruction of the 3 sacred lands had been caused by the 5 of them. During that great turmoil, the Chaos Sacred King and Life Sacred King had fallen, and the Samsara Sacred King had gone missing. The 5 Taishur primordial spirits were all injured. Before they fell into a deep sleep, the 5 heavenly Tao saint artifacts had been handed to them so that they could preside over the situation and stabilize the 3,000 worlds. It was also because of the 5 heavenly Tao saint artifacts that they were able to destroy the 3 sacred lands in one fell swoop. In this life, the heavenly Tao saint artifacts in their hands had been taken back, and they had lost their greatest reliance. The Samsara sacred land, Chaos sacred land, and Life sacred land had not only risen again, but the number of great saints they had surpassed them. They would suffer the backlash of the 3 sacred lands. All of this was like the heavenly Tao reincarnation, karma, and retribution. Even the hearts of the 5 sacred masters started to waver. But soon, the 5 sacred lords calmed down and regained their composure. As long as the 5 primordial spirits suppress the Samsara Sacred King, the situation will be settled, the Yin-Yang Sacred Lord said in a low voice. That's right. The heavenly punishment, Sacred Lord said. The 5 sacred lands have existed for so many years, and we have a strong foundation. It won't be easy for the 3 sacred lands to defeat us. What we need to do is to delay as much time as possible and wait for news from the 5 primordial spirits. The space-time Sacred Lord said. We don't have any heavenly Tao saint artifacts, and neither do they. Even if they have the advantage in numbers, it will be difficult for them to kill us. Ancestral fire, Guyao has already become a great saint. Which side will she stand on? The 4 sacred lords looked at the ancestral fire sacred lord. The ancestral fire sacred lord shook his head lightly. She won't stand on either side. Even if she sees me die, she won't do anything. The moment she becomes a great saint, the karma between us will be completely severed. Kill. Without any restraints, the numerous evil spirits and dark ghosts of the 33 heavens could no longer hold themselves back. As if they had gone mad, they charged towards the 5 holy lands. The greater thousand world fell into a huge turmoil once again. The flames of war rose everywhere. Not many of the living beings of the myriad races were spared. Boom! The two Taisher primordial spirits, yin-yang and heavenly punishment, attacked at the same time. They took out the two heavenly Tao Saint artifacts, the Taiji diagram and the heavenly punishment sword, and suppressed sacred king Samsara. Yin and yang chased each other, and the world spun. At this moment, sacred king Samsara seemed to be trapped in the Taiji diagram, and he could be killed at any time. Heaven and earth were yin and yang. Death and life were yin and yang. Sun and moon were yin and yang. Day and night were yin and yang. Cold and summer were yin and yang. Spring, summer, autumn, and winter were yin and yang as well. All things were yin and yang. This was also the reason why yin and yang became the heavenly Tao. Even sacred king Samsara couldn't escape from the heavenly Tao of yin and yang. The Taiji diagram, the heavenly Tao Saint artifact, could only unleash its true power in the hands of the yin and yang primordial spirits. The heavenly Tao of yin and yang filled every inch of space, and there was nowhere to hide. Buzz, buzz. The heavenly punishment sword kept trembling. Every time it trembled, it would release a dazzling bolt of lightning. The heavenly punishment sword was punishing on behalf of the heavens. What kind of power was this? Only the heavenly Tao could act on behalf of the heavens. A sword light appeared in the Taiji diagram. The heavenly punishment sword descended, and together with the Taiji diagram, it slashed towards sacred king Samsara. Sacred king Samsara was trapped, but he wasn't anxious. His expression was as usual as he casually tossed a pitch-black ancient book into the air. The pages of the book moved even though there was no wind. The pages opened one by one, releasing a black halo that blocked the Taiji diagram and the heaven's punishment sword. The human book. To be precise, it was the human book after fusing with the book of life and death. End of chapter. Chapter 3372. Boom! The three heavenly Tao Saint artifacts collided, erupting with a huge energy wave that almost destroyed heaven and earth. It instantly tore apart yin and yang and broke through Tianfa. Sacred King Samsara held the human book in his hand. It appeared again. The two Taisher primordial spirits were shocked. Their attacks had been completely neutralized and blocked by Sacred King Samsara. The two heavenly Tao Saint artifacts did not gain any advantage in front of the human book. That book in your hand is not the human book. The yin-yang primordial spirit stared at the human book with one black and one white eyes. The human book was the heavenly Tao Saint artifact of Sacred King life. More than 6 billion years ago, during the Great Turmoil, the human book was damaged and no longer had its power. Now the human book was in the hands of Sacred King Samsara. Not only was it unrecognizable, but it was even more powerful than before. Sacred King Samsara smiled and said, "To be precise, this is the real human book." The original human book was too small, and there were only many records of thousands of humans in it. But now the human book contains all the information of thousands of living beings. All living beings in the trichiliocosm, regardless of whether you are birds, beasts, or plants, are all listed in the human book. Su Zimo's heart jolted. What a big deal. All the information of life was in the human book. All living beings had no secrets in front of the human book. They did not have the slightest power to resist. This meant that as long as Sacred King Samsara wanted, he could use the human book to control the life and death of all living beings. The time and space primordial spirit, the ancestral fire primordial spirit, and the nirvana primordial spirit did not speak. They looked at each other and attacked at the same time. The three of them could see that the two Taisher primordial spirits, yin-yang and Tianfa, could not do anything to Sacred King Samsara. And Su Zimo was at the side. He was another big problem. They could not let him become a sacred king. Therefore, the ancestral fire primordial spirit, the nirvana primordial spirit, and the two Taisha primordial spirits joined forces and attacked Sacred King Samsara. And the time and space primordial spirit chose to attack Suzimo, wanting to kill him. A burning furnace appeared around Sacred King Samsara. It was red and spewing hot air, exuding the power to incinerate heaven and earth. The heavenly Tao Saint artifact, the heaven incinerating furnace. A long spear pierced over, emitting an ear-piercing sound as it pierced through the air. It was filled with killing intent. Heavenly Tao Saint artifact, saint-slaying spear. The four Taisha primordial spirits attacked at the same time. Although they were injured, however, they still possessed four heavenly Tao Saint artifacts. No matter how strong the human book was, it would not be able to withstand the attacks of four heavenly Tao Saint artifacts. Sacred King Samsara did not panic. His expression was calm as he gently slashed downward. Rumble. In the next instant, the sky collapsed and the earth caved in. This wasn't just a description, but the sky of the great thousand world had really collapsed. Suzimo's eyes widened when he saw this. If the greater thousand worlds were like a piece of cloth, then Saint King Samsara had torn off a corner of this cloth with a wave of his hand. That corner was where the 33 heavens were located. Saint King Samsara had actually separated the entire 33 heavens from the great thousand worlds and moved it in front of him. Boom! The saint-slaying spear and the heaven-incinerating furnace collided with the Trayastrimsa heaven, erupting with a deafening explosion. Amidst this loud explosion, Suzimo could vaguely hear waves of anguished wails. There were countless living beings living in the 33 heavens. In the instant when they resisted the saint-slaying spear and the heaven-incinerating furnace, the huge impact backfired on the 33 heavens. Countless living beings died in an instant, their souls scattered. Many living beings did not even know what had happened before they died. To the living beings in the 33 heavens, the scene just now was like the end of the world. How could they have known that such a terrifying apocalypse was only a single exchange between three saint kings? Suzimo had once guessed that there was a heavenly Tao Saint artifact in the 33 heavens. However, he had never thought that this heavenly Tao Saint artifact was the 33 heavens. Not to mention Suzimo, even the 5 Taisha primordial spirits' expressions changed when they saw the scene. This is the heavenly Tao Saint artifact of yours from back then. The ancestral fire primordial spirit's tone carried a trace of shock, doubt, and disbelief. That's right. Sacred King Samsara nodded and said, "Back then, after the heavenly Tao Saint artifact was destroyed by your joint efforts, I left it in the great thousand world and merged it with the 33 heavens to record the 3,000 great Tao. I then refined it and transformed it into a new heavenly Tao Saint artifact, which is called the Heavenly Book." Suzimo was shocked when he heard this. Refining a corner of the great thousand world into a saint artifact. What great courage! Who would have thought that the Heavenly Book was not a book, but a corner of the great thousand world? Back then, Sacred King Samsara had left Lord Tianwu in the great thousand world to merge the Heavenly Book with the 33 heavens and transform it. However, this method was too cruel to the living beings in the 33 heavens. They could become sacrifices in the game of the big shots at any time. At the same time, the space-time heavenly Tao power descended in the direction of Suzimo. At this point, the 5 Taisha primordial spirits had all attacked. With the help of the eyes of Qinglian's true body, Wu Dao's true body finally found traces of the power from the ancient universe when the 5 Taisha primordial spirits attacked. Is that so? In the Holy Ground land, Wu Dao's true body was deep in thought as he muttered to himself. Although he had roughly guessed the direction of the evolution of the chaotic universe, it would still take some time for the transformation to end. And since the Taisha primordial spirits had already attacked, Qinglian's true body could not resist at all and was about to die. All of a sudden, a sinister and terrifying shadow suddenly appeared in front of Suzimo. The space-time heavenly Tao power collided with it and quickly disappeared without a trace. Boom! The heaven, earth, dark yellow pagoda descended, wanting to smash the shadow. The two sides collided. The illusory image shook for a while, and a creepy building vaguely appeared in it, giving off a deathly aura. Even the heaven, earth, dark yellow pagoda could not shatter the shadow. Su Zimo's expression changed. This shadow gave him a sense of déjà vu. This is... Su Zimo muttered softly. A strange and sinister laughter suddenly sounded in Su Zimo's ears. Why, have you forgot me so quickly? Fengdu. Su Zimo was enlightened. This illusory image was actually the netherworld. If the netherworld could withstand the attack of the heaven, earth, dark, yellow pagoda, could it be the Taisher primordial spirits had a grim expression as he stared at the netherworld and said slowly, "Another heavenly Tao saint weapon." Sacred King Samsara smiled faintly. "That's right. The 3 books of heaven, earth, and man are in my hands. The heavenly book and man book have already appeared. This is the earth book." Earth book? Su Zimo froze for a moment before realization dawned on him. The heavenly book was not a book. It was refined from a corner of the greater world. Naturally, the earth book might not be a book either. The so-called earth book was the netherworld. The heavenly book recorded the 3,000 great Taos. The man book recorded the living beings of the myriad races, and the earth book contained the souls of dead living beings. For some reason, Su Zimo suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. End of chapter. Chapter 3373. The moment he saw the earth book, Su Zimo finally had an answer to the many questions he had about Fengdu. With his current eyesight, he could naturally tell that Fengdu wasn't a real living being. To be precise, Fengdu was the artifact spirit of the earth book. With the remnant soul of the Saint Lord of Samsara as the artifact spirit, only the netherworld was worthy of the name of the earth book. Therefore, Fengdu didn't have his own physical body. In the endless years in the medium-class world, Fengdu had tried his best to cultivate for several epochs just to create a great emperor's physical body. Fengdu had once said that he was immortal, not because he was a saint. It was precisely because he was the artifact spirit of the earth book. As long as the earth book was not destroyed, no matter how many times he died, he could use the earth book to be reborn. With the help of the earth book, Fengdu had achieved immortality in another sense. Back then, when Su Zimo ascended to the upper-class world, he had guarded the netherworld for tens of thousands of years. He wanted to find traces of Fengdu, but he found nothing. It was precisely because Fengdu was the artifact spirit of the netherworld that he could hide perfectly and hide from his perception. There was something more important. Originally, Su Zimo thought that Fengdu's actions in the medium-class world and the blood debts he had committed were just to prove his Tao as a great emperor. But at this moment he thought of another reason. The netherworld was the earth book. The source of its power came from the souls of all living beings after they died. In other words, the more wars there were, the more deaths there were, the more living beings would die, and the stronger the earth book would be. The earth book was completely in the hands of the Saint King of Samsara. Fengdu's endless bloodshed in the medium-class world might have been tacitly approved by the Saint King of Samsara. In fact, it was very likely that it was the Saint King of Samsara's instructions. Therefore, although the evil emperor hated evil and dragged countless evil people into the beast path, she had never touched Fengdu, the main evil. Even though she hated Fengdu to the extreme, she still had some misgivings. Perhaps the Saint King of Samsara behind Fengdu was the main reason. Of course, this was only Su Zimo's speculation. These thoughts flashed through his mind. On the other side, Saint King Samsara used the 3 books of heaven, earth, and man to fight against the 5 Taisher primordial spirits and 5 heavenly Tao Saint artifacts. Indeed, Saint King Samsara was fully prepared to make a comeback. Although it was difficult for Sacred King Samsara to suppress the 5 Taisher primordial spirits on his own, Sacred King Samsara was still able to do so. However, the 5 Taisher primordial spirits wanted to defeat him. It was impossible to do so in a short period of time. This bought Su Zimo a lot of time. Wu Dao's true body once again detonated the chaos verse and began to trace the origin of all the power in the universe. He continued to deduce the origin of Wu Dao. Su Zimo also took this opportunity to comprehend the mysteries of heaven and earth and the mysteries of the universe. After the chaos verse exploded, a terrifying power swept out in all directions. As time passed, the chaos verse actually disappeared. To be more precise, the chaos had disappeared. That universe was still there. However, that universe was not something that could be seen by the senses. This was because the two true bodies were mentally connected. Wu Dao's true body was that universe. Su Zimo could sense the existence of Wu Dao's true body. Therefore, he could vaguely sense the existence of a vast universe. In this vast universe, there was no matter, no life, and no great Tao. There was no light, no darkness, no beginning, and no end. There was not even the aura of chaos. However, this universe could vaguely be distinguished as a rough prototype. This was the only thing that Su Zimo could sense. This was an even more ancient and primitive universe. It had form but no substance. Gradually, in this empty universe, for balls of light were first born. They floated and approached the center of the universe. This is when Su Zimo saw these 4 balls of light. A sense of déjà vu arose in his heart. He seemed to have seen them somewhere before the battle between Saint King Samsara and the 5 Taisha primordial spirits continued. The aftermath of the power that erupted from both sides spread in all directions and struck Su Zimo, causing the bell of chaos to tremble and ring. Hearing this bell, Su Zimo suddenly came to a realization. On the bell of chaos, mountains, rivers, earth, sun, moon, and stars were engraved. It was majestic. Apart from that, there were 4 strange traces of power on the bell. It was not a great Tao, but it was indestructible. And the aura of these 4 traces of power was almost the same as the 4 balls of light in the universe that Wu Dao's true body had transformed into. After an unknown period of time, the 4 balls of light gathered at the center of the universe. This time, Su Zimo felt it even more clearly. These 4 balls of light were not alive, nor did they have any aura of life. They were just 4 pure ancient powers. One of them was similar to the great Tao of earth, but it was more inclusive. The other was similar to the great Tao of fire, but it was more ancient and primitive. One was similar to the great Tao of water, and the other was similar to the great Tao of wind. The 2 balls of light seemed to have inadvertently collided and merged with each other. A miraculous scene happened. The collision and fusion of the 2 forces burst forth with the aura of life. The first life in this universe was born. This life was still a little tender. It was an inch-long seedling that looked extremely weak. It was rooted in the universe and swayed gently. This was Chaos Qinglian. Under the guidance of Wu Dao's true body, the 4 balls of power collided and 5 more lives were born. On these 5 lives, the power of yin and yang, heavenly punishment, nirvana, space-time, and fire appeared. When all 6 lives were born, the 4 balls of power were completely exhausted. I see. Seeing this scene, Su Zimo was enlightened. That was the origin of the 6 Taisha primordial spirits. Su Zimo called these 4 balls of power of Taisha earth, water, wind, and fire. Due to the fusion of earth, water, wind, and fire, the 6 Taisha primordial spirits were born. They were also the first 6 lives in this universe. The 6 heavenly Daos of this universe descended. Su Zimo called this formless universe that gave birth to the 6 Taisha primordial spirits. In the greater thousand world, after the 5 Taisha primordial spirits attacked, Wu Dao's true body discovered the aura and traces of the 4 types of power of Taisha on them. From this, he deduced the existence of the Taisha primordial universe. However, the Taisha primordial universe had not completely stabilized and was still evolving. On the other side, Su Zimo's mind had already returned to the chaotic, sacred body. watching the formation of the Taisher primordial universe, the birth of the 6 Taisher primordial spirits, and even the 4 types of power of Taisher were of great help to him. He did not need to comprehend or cultivate. The entire process of the deepest secrets of the universe was completely presented before his eyes. Nothing was more direct than this. Enlightenment was nothing more than this. It could be said to be a step to heaven. All the barriers and bottlenecks blocking Su Zimo's path disappeared. Boom! Su Zimo took a step forward, and a loud sound came from his body. Dong! The bell of chaos seemed to have sensed something, and also erupted with a bell sound. Heaven and earth trembled, and the great Tao rang together. Su Zimo's aura soared, and in the blink of an eye, he broke through the barrier. It was as if he had arrived at the peak of a mountain, looking down at the world from above. Heavenly Tao, Sacred King. He was indeed standing at the peak of the 3,000 worlds. End of chapter. Chapter 3374. The 5 Taisher primordial spirits were shocked when they sensed this. The 5 of them joined forces to confront Saint King Samsara, and they were evenly matched, barely maintaining a balance. With another heavenly Tao Saint King joining the battlefield, the balance was bound to be broken. This meant which side Su Zimo was on. Which side would have a great chance of winning this battle of Saint Kings. This battle would also determine the future of the 3,000 worlds. Araki Takeshi, the yin-yang primordial spirit, suddenly said, Samsara is extremely ambitious. If you help him win, the 3,000 worlds will fall into an irreversible catastrophe. The moment he became a heavenly Tao Saint King, Su Zimo calmed down instead. He just looked at the Saint Kings on the battlefield and was not in a hurry to make a move. At this moment, the initiative was in his hands. He still had to clarify some things. Su Zimo said, Samsara wants to kill all the saints in the world and establish the 6 paths of reincarnation, rewarding the good and punishing the evil. If this is his ambition, it's not bad. The heavenly punishment primordial spirit said in a deep voice, he doesn't just want the lives of the saints, he even wants to kill all the great saints, including us Taisher primordial spirits. The ancestral fire primordial spirit also said, when we 6 Taisher primordial spirits ruled the 3,000 worlds, there were checks and balances between us. Once we are killed, Samsara will be the sole ruler, and that will be a disaster for the 3,000 worlds. The time and space primordial spirit said, the infinite calamity of living beings cannot threaten us at all. If Samsara only wants to kill the saints, we will not interfere. Su Zimo nodded. This was the reason for the battle of Saint Kings back then. He had previously thought that since the infinite calamity of living beings could not threaten the Taisher primordial spirits, why would they participate? Because what made them feel threatened was not the infinite calamity of living beings, but Saint King Samsara. How did Chaos Qinglian and Life Saint King fall? Su Zimo asked again. In the battle of Saint Kings back then, the 5 Taisher primordial spirits had the upper hand and might have won in the end. But to completely kill Chaos Qinglian and Life Saint King, with the power of the 5 Taisher primordial spirits, they might not be able to do it. An existence like the heavenly Tao Sacred King was on par with the Taisher primordial spirit. Unless it was a higher level of power, it was impossible to completely annihilate them. However, there was no such expert in the trichiliocosm, unless Nirvana primordial spirit said, in the battle back then, chaos, life, and reincarnation joined forces, but they were no match for us. Chaos and life saw that the situation was over. When he spoke up to hear, the Nirvana origin spirit stopped for a moment, and he seemed to have recalled the scene from all those years ago. An extremely complicated expression surged onto his face, and there was resentment, rage, unwillingness, and terror. The Nirvana origin spirit took a deep breath and said slowly, at the last moment, chaos and life joined forces and chose to challenge the 3,000 worlds. They are lunatics. Su Zimo was slightly taken aback, but immediately understood. The moment he became a heavenly Tao sacred king, he could sense that there were cracks in the entire 3,000 worlds. These cracks were left behind when Chaos Qinglian and the Life Holy King joined forces to attack the Trichiliocosm. With the power of Chaos Qinglian and Life Holy King, of course, it was impossible to destroy the Trichiliocosm. Their goal was to leave cracks in the Trichiliocosm. The 5 Taisher, primordial spirits, were born from this universe. When cracks that could not be repaired appeared in this universe, the injuries of the 5 Taisher, primordial spirits, could not be healed. As for the reincarnation Holy King, he was a heavenly Tao, sacred king, and would not have this hidden danger. Chaos Qinglian and Life Holy King knew that the situation was over, so they made this choice. They sacrificed themselves to pave the way for the reincarnation Holy King and usher in this generation's sacred king battle. Only the Trichiliocosm that had evolved over countless years had the power to destroy Chaos Qinglian and Life Holy King. As they spoke, the confrontation between the 5 Taisher primordial spirits and reincarnation continued. Su Zimo's gaze turned and looked at the reincarnation Holy King. Unlike the 5 Taisher primordial spirits, the reincarnation Holy King did not ask him to help him. From the beginning to the end, he did not even defend himself. In Su Zimo's opinion, the reincarnation Holy King's choice back then might not have been wrong. He wanted to build a fair world and kill all immortals. Naturally, the 5 Taisher primordial spirits were included in that. If he only killed a sacred king and turned a blind eye to the 5 Taisher primordial spirits, then what was the difference between him and those sages who killed all living beings? And he himself was an immortal. What would he do after suppressing the 5 Taisher primordial spirits? Su Zimo did not know. Perhaps the reincarnation Holy King would become an even greater disaster. But Su Zimo would not join forces with the 5 Taisher primordial spirits to kill the reincarnation Holy King because of a possibility. Moreover, the 5 Taisher primordial spirits wanted to kill him just now, and the reincarnation Holy King had saved him. He did not know what the reincarnation Holy King would do in the future. But at least at this moment, he had no reason to be enemies with the reincarnation Holy King. Araki Takeshi, what are you still hesitating for? The Nirvana primordial spirit shouted. Don't! The bell of chaos rang in response to the Nirvana primordial spirit. Through this bell, the 5 Taisher primordial spirits felt Su Zimo's intentions at the same time, and their hearts sank. Boom! In the next moment, the bell of chaos above Su Zimo's head descended on the battlefield, blocking the yin-yang primordial spirits and the space-time primordial spirits. Although they were all heavenly Tao, sacred kings, the 5 Taisher primordial spirits were injured after all. Su Zimo was at the peak of the heavenly Tao, sacred king state, controlling the heavenly Tao of chaos. He was not at a disadvantage against 2. On the other side, the reincarnation Holy King was originally 1 against 5. Now that he was facing 3 Taisher primordial spirits, the pressure on him decreased sharply, and his aura soared. The 3 books of heaven, earth, and man were activated to the extreme, covering the sky and the sun, reversing the universe, and exerting the power of the heavenly Tao's reincarnation to the extreme. Boom! 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 The battle between the sacred kings was earth-shattering. Not only was the greater Kiliocosm in turmoil, but even the middle Kiliocosm and lesser Kiliocosm were implicated, and natural disasters erupted one after another. Most of the living beings in the Trichiliocosm did not know what was going on. They only looked at the blood-red sky and the falling blood rain with faces full of horror. In the greater Kiliocosm, the battle between the sages and the great sages continued, and it was getting more and more tragic. Sages fell in the battle one after another. Even the great sages fought until they were covered in wounds, and blood flowed everywhere. The 5 sacred lords were already at their limit to be able to hold on until now. They still had a glimmer of hope in their hearts. They were looking forward to the 5 Taisher primordial spirits winning in the battle between the sacred kings, just like back then. Ah! At this moment, a scream came from above the greater Kiliacosm. This was the voice of the heavenly punishment, primordial spirit. The three Taishur primordial spirits were still unable to withstand the attack of the reincarnation, Holy King. The heavenly punishment sword was first suppressed by the Earth Book. Immediately after, the human book severely injured the heavenly punishment primordial spirit. The heavenly book descended and directly swallowed the heavenly punishment primordial spirit. The heavenly punishment primordial spirit erupted for a while in the heavenly book, but in the end it was still no match and was suppressed by the heavenly book, its body and spirit destroyed. After suppressing the heavenly punishment primordial spirit, the heavenly book suddenly erupted with a dazzling brilliance. Its entire body was surrounded by lightning and its aura soared. There was also an obvious increase in power. The heavenly book originally only recorded the 3,000 great Taos, but now there was an additional heavenly Tao in the heavenly book, heavenly punishment. The human book had an additional page. Every page of the human book recorded a living being of a race, and on this page only one living being was recorded, the heavenly punishment primordial spirit. The Earth Book also devoured the soul of a Taishur primordial spirit, suppressing the heavenly punishment primordial spirit. The power of the three books was rapidly rising. The three books of heaven, earth, and man, the three heavenly Tao sacred artifacts, were still continuing to grow. End of chapter. Chapter 3375. Su Zimo suddenly realized something. Even if he did not become a heavenly Tao sacred king, the 5 Taishur primordial spirits would not be able to escape the fate of being suppressed by Sacred King Samsara. Sacred King Samsara controlled the 3 books of heaven, earth, and man, from life to death, from heaven to earth, from the great Tao to the rules and laws. The 3 books were all-encompassing and covered everything. This war swept across the greater thousand world. As time passed, more and more experts died, including sages and great sages. When these experts died, their energy should have returned to heaven and earth. But now, it was all integrated into the 3 books of heaven, earth, and man. The longer the war lasted, the more creatures died. Sacred King Samsara's combat power would be stronger until he completely surpassed the 5 Taishur primordial spirits. Sacred King Samsara had made a comeback. Even if the 5 Taishur primordial spirits joined forces, they would not be able to stop him. Experts like the Taishur primordial spirits were not in the 6 paths of reincarnation. But just now, Tian Fa's heavenly Tao was sealed in the heavenly book. Tian Fa's creatures were recorded in the heavenly book, and their fate was controlled by the heavenly book. No matter how strong Tian Fa's soul was, it was also difficult for one person to break free from the 6 realms. It could only be imprisoned by the Earth Book. It was sealed in the netherworld. Tian Fa's primordial spirit died. Even if Sacred King Samsara could not kill it completely, its soul could not escape the heavenly Tao's reincarnation. It was still under Sacred King Samsara's control. In other words, as long as Sacred King Samsara did not allow it, Tian Fa's primordial spirit would never be able to rise again. At this moment, after Sacred King Samsara suppressed Tian Fa's primordial spirit, the power of the 3-book sword, and the pressure on the Nirvana primordial spirits and Ancestral Fire primordial spirits increased greatly. Even when the 3 Taishur primordial spirits joined forces, Sacred King Samsara suppressed one of Tian Fa's primordial spirits. Now, only Nirvana primordial spirits and Ancestral Fire primordial spirits were left, and Sacred King Samsara's combat power had increased greatly. Under this situation, the 2 Taishur primordial spirits could not resist Sacred King Samsara's attack at all. When the Yin-Yang primordial spirits and space-time primordial spirits who were fighting Su Zimo saw this scene, a trace of panic flashed in their eyes. They could feel the terrifying aura emitted from Sacred King Samsara. The Yin-Yang original spirit suddenly shouted, "Araki Takashi, once we die, he will never let you go!" Now, Only by joining forces with us can we suppress him. This is your only chance. The time and space origin spirit also shouted. Su Zimo's expression was calm and unmoved. It wasn't as if his heart had never wavered. But just now, he suddenly thought of another matter and couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. When he became a heavenly Tao sacred king, the 5 Taisha primordial spirits immediately began to rope him in. On the other hand, Saint King Samsara did not say a word. He had no intention of trying to win him over. Even in the face of the 5 Taisha primordial spirits' accusations, Sacred King Samsara did not defend himself. At that time, Su Zimo was neutral. It was possible for him to stand on either side. But Saint King Samsara's performance was too calm. It felt as if they were not worried about Su Zimo leaning towards the 5 Taisha primordial spirits at all. One possibility was that Saint King Samsara trusted him enough. And just now he thought of another possibility. The Book of Human recorded all living beings and controlled the fate of all living beings in the world. In other words, even his fate was within the range of the Book of Human's records. Saint King Samsara could use the Book of Human to suppress him with just a thought. Therefore, Saint King Samsara was not worried about him leaning towards the 5 Taisha primordial spirits, because his existence was not a threat to Saint King Samsara at all. Boom! Just as these thoughts flashed through Su Zimo's mind, he heard a loud sound. The ancestral fire origin spirit was suppressed by Saint King Samsara. One more heavenly book, one more page in the Book of Human, one more soul in the Earth Book. The Taisha primordial spirits, heavenly Tao, fate, and soul. The power of the 3 books rose again. In the blink of an eye, 2 of the 5 Taisha primordial spirits were gone. The Nirvana primordial spirit, the Yin-Yang primordial spirit, and the time and space origin spirit knew that they had lost. Their expressions were calm, but their eyes were dim. They knew that everything was over. Die. Saint King Samsara was surrounded by the 3 books of heaven, earth, and man. He stepped forward and intercepted the Yin-Yang primordial spirit and the time and space origin spirit opposite Su Zimo. 1 against 3, his aura was monstrous. Su Zimo stopped and stood quietly at the side, watching the scene silently. There was no need for him to make a move in this battle. With the power of Saint King Samsara, it was enough to suppress the remaining 3 Taisha primordial spirits. Saint King Samsara wore a black robe and his long hair danced wildly. His attacks were ferocious, as if he was venting something. This battle of Saint Kings did not last long. The remaining 3 Taisha primordial spirits were all suppressed by Saint King Samsara and sealed in the 3 books. The 3 books floated above Saint King Samsara's head and emitted a mysterious power that surged into his body, causing his aura to rise continuously. After this battle, not only was Saint King Samsara uninjured, his combat strength was even stronger than before. The heavenly book recorded the 6 heavenly Taos of heavenly punishment, yin-yang, space-time, ancestral fire, nirvana, and reincarnation, as well as 3,000 great Taos. The Book of Man contained the fate of all living beings, including the 5 Taisha primordial spirits. The Book of Earth also contained the souls of all living beings over countless years. With the 3 books in hand, Saint King Samsara was the only god in the 3,000 worlds. It's time to end this. Saint King Samsara looked down at the battlefield of the great sages from above. He slowly reached out his palm and gently swiped it downward. Endless fear appeared in the eyes of the 5 sacred lords, as if they were facing some great terror. Their pupils constricted. In the next moment, under everyone's gaze, the 5 sacred lords were gently wiped away like dust on a bronze mirror. In that void, one could see the long mark of a palm. There was no struggle, no blood. The 5 sacred lords were wiped away just like that and disappeared into thin air. When the heavenly path sect master, the Lord of Hell, and the rest saw this scene, their hearts trembled. The great sage of chaos heaved a sigh of relief and muttered, "It's finally over." The mountain elder and evil lord did not look relaxed. On the contrary, their expressions were solemn. The demon lord was covered in wounds. Even though his blood flowed onto the nameless tombstone under him, his face was still expressionless. When the saints of the 5 sacred lands saw this scene, their expressions were shocked. They all stopped fighting and stopped fighting. The situation was already over. It was useless for them to continue fighting. When the saints of the 3 sacred lands saw this, they did not continue to pursue. More than enough saints had fallen in this battle. The battle did not last long, but the greater 1,000 worlds were already devastated, and corpses were everywhere. At this moment, the saints felt their vision darken. They subconsciously looked up. They saw a large hand that was faintly discernible, gently sweeping past their heads as if it was wiping away dust. In the next moment, the saints under this large hand disappeared from this world. With a sweep of the large hand, hundreds of saints died. Among them, not only the saints of the 5 sacred lands, but also the saints of the 3 sacred lands. Many of the saints of the human race had also died. Chapter 3376. You, what are you doing? The mountain elder looked at the fallen sages below, his arms trembling slightly as he stared at sacred King Samsara and asked in a deep voice, "Of course I'm killing the sages." Sacred King Samsara's gaze swept past the mountain elder, evil lord, and the others as he said with a faint smile, "Then it's you guys." There seemed to be a hint of a smile and a hint of mockery in his eyes, but everyone who looked at him felt a bone-chilling coldness. And then the mountain elder's expression was calm as he continued to ask. Sacred King Samsara said casually, "Then I'll kill all living beings in this world and accompany you on your journey. I'll let you die a glorious death. How about that?" Everyone was shocked. "Are you crazy?" The supreme sage of chaos could not help but ask. Su Zimo frowned slightly and said, "I remember you saying that you want to build a world where all living beings are equal." "Oh," Sacred King Samsara smiled and said, "I forgot to tell you. That was my original idea," Su Zimo said. "If you're killing the sages to resolve the immeasurable calamity of all living beings, then why are you killing all living beings? Do I need a reason?" Sacred King Samsara said indifferently, "In the Trichiliocosm, only I am supreme. With the 3 books heaven, earth, and man, the life and death of all living beings are in my control. I can kill if I want to. Who can do anything to me?" Evil Lord looked at Sacred King Samsara coldly and said, "Back then, I was willing to follow you. I believed in Master's judgment. Unfortunately, she was wrong about you. The Dragon Slayer became an evil dragon." Evil Lord suddenly looked at Su Zimo and said, "Do you still remember what I didn't finish in the Chaos Hall?" Su Zimo nodded. At that time, the Evil Lord had suddenly said something. "If an existence that no one can fight against is born in the Trichiliocosm," Evil Lord had only said half of it. At this moment, Evil Lord continued, "If this existence is evil, what should we do?" "Then we'll kill it again," Su Zimo said. Evil Lord also nodded and said in a cold tone, "If the Dragon Slayer becomes an evil dragon, then we'll kill it again." "Ha ha ha ha!" Saint King Samsara laughed out loud. "Evil Lord, are you counting on him to help you?" Saint King Samsara said, "Although he has cultivated to the level of Heavenly Path Saint King, he is no threat to me. His birth was after the mortal book was completed. His fate was recorded in the mortal book. I can suppress it with a single thought." As expected, when Su Zimo heard this, his expression was calm. He had just thought of this possibility. Among the Trichiliocosm, only the great sage of chaos, the mountain elder, the evil lord, and a few others who were born before the human book were not suppressed by it. However, the mountain elder, evil lord, and the others had yet to become heavenly Tao Saint Kings. They were no match for Saint King Samsara. Furthermore, the 3 books of heaven, earth, and man had already devoured 5 Taisher primordial spirits. Saint King Samsara's combat power had probably surpassed the heavenly path Saint King. No one knew what level he had reached. After enduring for so long, are you still not going to draw your sword? At this moment, Saint King Samsara suddenly said something out of the blue. Then he slowly turned his head and looked at a person not far away. That person was sitting on the nameless tombstone. He was wearing black armor and was covered in wounds. His face was expressionless. It was the evil lord. Everyone was secretly puzzled. What was the evil lord enduring? Who was he going to draw his sword against? Saint King Samsara continued, "You are in charge of the Ashura, but you cultivate the path of killing. In the Shura field behind you, there are 4 tombs. For killing swords are buried in each of them. Heaven-slaying, earth-destroying, king-killing, and kin-killing. You are naturally cold. Only by slaying heaven-destroying, earth-destroying, king-killing, and kin-killing were you able to nurture the 4 killing swords. And if you want to improve your path of killing, you have to refine the 5th tomb and nurture the 5th killing sword, master killing." Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. Heaven, earth, king, kin, and master. The evil lord's path of killing was actually cultivated like this, and the evil lord's master was the Saint King Samsara in front of him. "You are right," the evil lord said slowly. The evil lord said slowly, "If I want to improve further and become a heavenly Tao Saint King, I have to sacrifice your life to my sword. Even if you kill me, you won't become a heavenly Tao Saint King." Saint King Samsara shook his head and said, "Because your path of killing still has a 6th tomb. This 6th tomb is the tomb that you will bury yourself in." As soon as he finished speaking, the evil lord's body clearly shook a little. It was obvious that his mind was in turmoil. One had to know that even in the battle between the great sages just now, nothing could shake the evil lord's heart. He was expressionless and unperturbed from start to finish. However, at this moment, Saint King Samsara's words clearly touched the evil lord's weakness. Saint King Samsara said, "Heaven-slaying, earth-destroying, king-killing, kin-killing, and master-killing. The tombstone that you are sitting on is prepared for you. With my own blood, with my own soul, I will nurture the final sort of slaughter, slaughter self." Su Zimo, the mountain elder, and the others were enlightened. Even the mountain elder and the others did not know that the tombstone that the evil lord was sitting on was actually for himself. No wonder it was blank. As expected of the path of killing, heaven-slaying, earth-destroying, king-killing, kin-killing, master-killing, and self-killing. Each step was more ruthless than the last. At the end of cultivation, one had to give oneself a sword to achieve the heavenly Tao. Whether it was the evil lord or the evil lord, they were both people with firm Tao hearts and were difficult to shake. Although the evil lord followed Saint King Samsara, she hated evil. Therefore, when she saw that Saint King Samsara was about to do evil, she abandoned all restraints and chose to fight against Saint King Samsara. The evil lord was the same. Saint King Samsara was his master, but for the path of killing, he even wanted to attack Saint King Samsara. After being exposed by Saint King Samsara, the evil lord's emotions were still a little stirred at first. However, he had already calmed down and said lightly, "This can't be hidden from you." What a pity. Saint King Samsara was a little disappointed. "I still overestimated you. I waited for so long, but you didn't dare to attack me. You can't even kill your master. How are you going to kill yourself?" The evil lord's expression changed slightly. His emotions that had calmed down were stirred again. Saint King Samsara's words were like a sharp knife that went straight to his heart. Saint King Samsara continued, "Killing yourself requires a lot of courage and boldness. Do you think that after replacing me and becoming the lord of all spirits and the ruler of the 3 realms, you still have the courage to kill yourself? Can you really stab this sword down?" The evil lord's face turned even paler. Saint King Samsara said, "I've lived for countless years and witnessed a lot of history. I've also seen too many people and too many things. Many people have good intentions, But as time passes and their cultivation levels increase, how many people can maintain their original intentions? People's hearts change. This is an eternal truth. I'm like that. If it's you, all of you will be the same. As he said that, Saint King Samsara looked around. His gaze swept past everyone, and when it landed on Su Zimo, it paused slightly. Su Zimo's heart suffered a huge blow when he heard that. Not only the evil lord, but even he was deep in thought. As long as one was human, they had their own selfish desires. Who wouldn't change? If one really reached that position and became the ruler of the three realms and the only one in the world, who could guarantee that they would remain the same throughout the long years and not get lost. Even if they could guarantee that they would not change, how could they guarantee that their family, brothers, and descendants would remain the same? Chapter 3377. The evil lord also fell silent. The dragon slayer eventually became the evil dragon. Even if they killed the evil dragon, who could guarantee that they would not become a new evil dragon? Wasn't this another kind of reincarnation? How could they avoid this kind of reincarnation? Could it be that the trichiliocosm really couldn't escape this fate? At this moment, the mountain elder sighed softly. With a sad expression, he suddenly asked, "Is it for Master?" The only person who could make the mountain elder call him Master was Life Saint. Saint King Samsara raised his head, slightly with a bleak expression. He looked at the faint crack in the sky and didn't say a word. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. Just now, Saint King Samsara was arrogant and had a strong aura. Just based on those few words alone, it had a huge impact on everyone. When the mountain elder mentioned Life Saint, Saint King Samsara seemed to have changed into another person. Looking at the current Saint King Samsara, Su Zimo seemed to see the lonely figure sitting alone by the sea in the holy ground. Could it be that between Saint King Samsara and Life Saint, the mountain elder sighed again and said, "Even if you want to take revenge for Master, you don't have to vent your anger on all living beings. They have nothing to do with this matter. They are innocent." Saint King Samsara still stood with his hands behind his back and remained silent. Master, is what he said true? At this moment, another woman slowly walked over. This woman looked extremely young. She was a little immature, but compared to the Brahma ghost mother, they were 80 to 90% similar. Brahma ghost mother? Everyone recognized this woman immediately. But soon, everyone realized that this woman should be the reincarnation of the Brahma ghost mother. Her cultivation realm was extremely low, but her memories from back then were still there. The Brahma ghost mother stared at Saint King Samsara. Clenching her fists tightly, her eyes were complicated and filled with grief and resentment. She slowly asked, "You can kill all living beings in the world for that woman, but you're not even willing to help me when I'm killed." Saint King Samsara didn't even look at the Brahma ghost mother. He only replied coldly, "Are you worthy of being mentioned in the same breath as her?" This sentence was extremely cruel and heartless. Hearing this, the Brahma ghost mother's body swayed slightly. Nirvana, ghost mother laughed, but her face was already full of tears. She murmured, "So, after so many years of following and accompanying you, I'm actually so lowly in your heart. I can't even compare to her." Brahma ghost mother giggled and said softly, "If that's the case, why did you save my soul? Wouldn't it be great if I could die with the memories of my past life?" Saint King Samsara finally turned around and looked at the Brahma ghost mother expressionlessly. "Do you want to die? I can fulfill your wish." The heavenly path Tao Master, the King of Hell, and the others were secretly shocked and looked at each other in shock. Not to mention them, even the people on Su Zimo's and the great sage of Chaos's side found it hard to believe when they heard those cold words. No matter what, the Brahma ghost mother was still Saint King Samsara's disciple. However, Sacred King Samsara did not seem to have any feelings for this disciple. The ghost mother smiled and bowed to Saint King Samsara. "Thank you, Master. We're all going to die. Since that's the case, I'll send you on your way first." Saint King Samsara waved his sleeves. Poof! The Brahma ghost mother instantly turned into dust in front of everyone. Her body and soul were destroyed. Everyone felt a chill in their hearts. Facing his own disciple, Saint King Samsara had killed him without hesitation. The Heavenly Path Tao Master and the King of Hell looked at Saint King Samsara with fear and a trace of unfamiliarity. The Lord of Hell suddenly took a step forward and knelt down in front of Saint King Samsara. With a respectful expression, he said in a deep voice, "Master's action is no different from creating a new world. It should be admired by all ages. Only Master can uphold justice for the 3,000 worlds. I am willing to be the first to follow Master and protect hell for Master." You kneeled so quickly. Saint King Samsara smiled. There seemed to be a hidden meaning behind those words. The King of Hell obviously heard it, but he remained calm and did not even blush. He said in a deep voice, "It's only right for me to kneel and worship Master. It's also out of respect for Master." Flattery is indeed nice. Saint King Samsara nodded slightly and changed the topic. "Unfortunately, you still have to die after kneeling." The King of Hell's expression changed slightly. The Heavenly Path Tao Master also knelt suddenly and said in a deep voice, "Master wants us to die to uphold justice. I have no complaints. Hell, as long as our souls are still here, Master can reincarnate us at any time. Master's actions are for the greater good. You have to understand Master's difficulties." The King of Hell quickly said, "Heavenly Path Tao Master is right. Greater good? Difficulties?" Saint King Samsara laughed loudly as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. He glanced at the two with a mocking expression and said, "Death is death. You have no chance of reincarnation." The Heavenly Path Tao Master and the King of Hell panicked. They knew that Saint King Samsara was a man of his words. He would not joke with them. Master, why is this?" The Lord of Hell's voice was trembling. Saint King Samsara said lightly, "The two of you are far inferior to Asya. You can't even compare to the Demon Lord." Before he finished speaking, Saint King Samsara suddenly appeared in front of the King of Hell and the Heavenly Path Tao Master. His palm had already landed on their heads. Other than Suzimo, no one saw Saint King Samsara's actions clearly. When the crowd reacted, they saw Saint King Samsara's palm gently pressing on the two's heads. Thump! The King of Hell and the Heavenly Path Tao Master were in a daze. Their vitality was quickly draining away. They fell to the ground and were no longer breathing. Their souls had dissipated. Two great sages were killed by Saint King Samsara so easily. Moreover, these two were Saint King Samsara's disciples. They were the original guardians of the Heavenly Path and Hell Path. Crazy! Saint King Samsara had gone crazy. This was the only thought left in the minds of the great sage of chaos and the others. They could not understand Saint King Samsara's actions at all. Could it be that Saint King Samsara would only stop after he killed everyone in the world? Only the Demon Lord and the Mountain Elder knew that no one could change Saint King Samsara's mind and decision. The only person who could do this had died more than 6 billion years ago. Next, it's you guys. Saint King Samsara looked at Suzimo, the Demon Lord, the Mountain Elder, the great sage of chaos, and the others. He smiled faintly with murderous intent in his eyes. At this moment, even if they knew that they were no match for him, they could not wait to die. Roar! The great sage of chaos roared. His bloodline surged and his aura skyrocketed. The Demon Lord and the Mountain Elder attacked as well. Too weak. Saint King Samsara shook his head. With a gentle lift of his hand, the great sage of chaos and the others felt a shocking pressure descending from the sky. The power was so strong that it almost crushed them into dust. Dong! The bell of chaos rang. Suzimo took out the heavenly Tao sacred weapon and joined the battle. Ha! Saint King Samsara was calm. With a thought, the book of human descended. Suzimo felt as though his essence spirit was being pinched by an invisible hand. His expression changed drastically. With a grunt, the bell of chaos also shook. Chapter 3378. Saint King Samsara was right. Su Zimo's soul was in the human book. Saint King Samsara could suppress him with just a thought. He could not fight against Saint King Samsara at all. The demon lord, mountain elder, and saint of chaos were powerless to resist under Saint King Samsara's pressure. The difference between the two sides was too great. The various saints below were powerless to do anything as they watched this scene unfold. Saint King Samsara looked at everyone and said indifferently, "I control the 3 books of heaven, earth, and man. I control the 3,000 worlds. No one in this world can compete with me. Even if all of you join forces, it's useless." "You're right." Su Zimo tried his best to resist the huge pressure from his soul. He gritted his teeth and said, "But there is one person who has jumped out of the 3 realms and is not in the 5 elements. He does not enter the cycle of reincarnation. He is not in your human book." As soon as he finished speaking, a loud sound came from below the greater 1,000 worlds. Rumble. The sky collapsed and the earth cracked. A ball of purple fire broke through the barrier of the greater 1,000 worlds. It resisted Saint King Samsara's pressure and went against the flow. In the blink of an eye, it arrived above the greater 1,000 worlds. The fire dissipated and a figure appeared. The person had black hair and a purple robe. 2 balls of purple flames burned in his eyes. His body emitted a vast and mysterious aura. There was no light, no darkness, no beginning and no end. It surpassed time and space and stood above the 3 realms. Wu Dao's true body had descended. Wu Dao's true body's grand beginning universe had already stabilized. In the grand beginning universe, under the guidance of his will, 6 grand beginning primordial spirits had even evolved. Of course, these 6 grand beginning primordial spirits had just been born. They were of limited help to him. But this meant that the power of Wu Dao's true body was already above the 6 grand beginning primordial spirits. Even if Saint King Samsara controlled the 3 books of heaven, earth, and man, he still had the power to fight. Saint King Samsara used the 3 books to control the 3,000 worlds. And Wu Dao's true body was the grand beginning universe. The grand beginning universe had just been born, so its power could not compare to the 3,000 worlds that had evolved over countless years. However, cracks had appeared in Saint King Samsara's 3,000 worlds. No one knew what the outcome of the battle between the grand beginning universe and the 3,000 worlds would be. This was an unprecedented battle. Seeing Wu Dao's real body appear, Sacred King Samsara's expression was calm, and he was not surprised. "It seems that you've walked your own path." Saint King Samsara smiled and said, "She didn't misjudge you." Su Zimo was stunned. Before he could ask, Saint King Samsara continued, "Unfortunately, even your Wu Dao true body can't stop me from doing what I want to do." Sacred King Samsara's eyes lit up as he unleashed a powerful divine that surged into the 3 books. 1. The heavenly book continued to spread, almost covering the great wide world. The human book seemed to be unable to withstand this kind of power. Countless pages scattered in the air, each page blooming with a dim light. The earth book kept shaking. The netherworld shook violently. Many palaces were collapsing. The power of the 3 books exploding at the same time was enough to destroy the heavens and earth. The martial Dao body's heart trembled, and he shouted, "Samsara, what are you trying to do?" Sacred King Samsara's current posture did not seem like he wanted to fight him at all. Instead, he wanted to destroy the 3,000 worlds. Su Zimo suddenly realized something. If everything Sacred King Samsara did was for Sacred King life, then he had a good reason to destroy the 3,000 worlds. That was because Sacred King life had died after fighting against the 3,000 worlds. If it was a Taisha primordial spirit or a heavenly Dao Sacred King, they would not be able to destroy the 3,000 worlds. Back then, when Chaos Qinglian and Sacred King life worked together, they could only create a few cracks in the 3,000 worlds. However, the current sacred king, Samsara, did have this ability. The 3 books of heaven, earth, and man almost covered the entire 3,000 worlds, including all living beings. The heavenly Tao, the great Tao, and the life and death of all living beings were all included. Detonating the 3 books of heaven, earth, and man could destroy the 3,000 worlds that had already cracked. Wu Dao's real body had a solemn expression. This was an irreversible process. If he were to fight with sacred king Samsara, it was still unknown who would win. However, if sacred king Samsara wanted to destroy the 3,000 worlds, he would not be able to stop him with his current strength. Moreover, the destruction of the 3,000 worlds also meant that all living beings in the 3,000 worlds would die, including the saints and the great sages. No one would be spared. Even sacred king Samsara himself could not withstand such a terrifying power. Similarly, Wu Dao's real body could not either. Sacred king Samsara had long been determined to die. Not only did he want to drag everyone down with him, but he also wanted to bury the entire 3,000 worlds. This was sacred king Samsara's final madness. The evil lord, the mountain elder, and the others also realized this matter and felt a deep sense of powerlessness in their hearts. When a powerhouse was born in the world that no power could keep in check, once this powerhouse fell into madness, everyone would be faced with a calamity. The only thing all living beings in this world could do was wait for the end of the world. Between heaven and earth, some lovers held each other's hands tightly. Some parents hugged their children tightly in their arms and comforted them softly. Some people looked desperate and cried bitterly. Some people closed their eyes and waited for the final moment to arrive. Under the catastrophe, all living beings had different expressions. This moment seemed to be extremely long. Su Zimo and Dai Yu had a tacit understanding and looked at each other at the same time. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. In this life, they had also been vigorous and finally walked together. That was enough. The 3 books of heaven, earth, and man completely exploded, erupting with a terrifying power that swept through the 3,000 worlds and destroyed everything. The saints and great sages could not withstand it at all and quickly turned into a cloud of blood mist. The living beings of the 10,000 races were even more miserable and were instantly turned into ashes. Countless lives were withering. Mountains and rivers were being destroyed. As a heavenly Tao sacred king, Su Zimo could only hold on for a moment before he was devoured by this terrifying power and died. After an unknown period of time, only 2 figures were left in the void: Wu Dao's real body and sacred king Samsara. Sacred king Samsara took a deep look at Wu Dao's real body. He still had that strange look in his eyes. Wu Dao's real body did not have the mood and time to understand. The 3,000 worlds were also collapsing and shattering. This destructive power set off layers of storms in the ruins of the 3,000 worlds and tore sacred king Samsara apart. Wu Dao's real body was in the center of this storm and could not avoid it, but he still did not give up. He still had one last choice: take the initiative to detonate the grand beginning universe and use this power to resist the destructive storm of the 3,000 worlds. In the explosion of the 2 universes, continue to evolve on the ruins of the 2 worlds and trace back to the origin of the universe. If he could evolve an even more primitive and ancient universe, he might be able to obtain a new life in the destructive storm of the 3,000 worlds. If he could not deduce it, his consciousness would return to silence and he would die. Before this, Wu Dao's real body was able to successfully evolve 3 times because of the powerful living beings that originally existed in the 3,000 worlds and the traces of Dao techniques. However, no one could give him an answer as to what the grand beginning universe was like before. Next, he could only deduce it himself. Wu Dao's real body was not completely clueless. After he evolved the grand beginning universe, he began to reorganize his Dao techniques. He called the Yuanwu world, supported by the 3,000 great Dao Taiji. In this stage of the Yuanwu world, yin and yang, had just separated, evolving all things. After that, the 3,000 grand Taos were obliterated, and they transformed into a boundless and vast chaotic universe. In the chaos, yin, yang, and yang were born. Yin and yang intertwined, forming the 5 elements. This stage was known as Taisu in martial arts. Then, the grand essence universe was destroyed, evolving into a universe without matter, life, or great Tao. There was no light, no darkness, no beginning and no end. There was only a vague embryonic form. This was a universe with form but no substance. Wu Dao's real body called this stage Grand Beginning. After that, an even more ancient universe with origin stones might be born. It was formless and without substance. Not only did it have no substance, but it also did not have any form. Even if one was inside, they could not see, touch, or feel it. Wu Dao's real body called this stage Grand Beginning. However, no one knew if there was a grand beginning or what it would be like. The 3,000 worlds were destroyed, and all things were destroyed. In the empty universe, there were no traces of life or sound. Dark, cold, and lonely. Only a small thought slowly groped in the darkness, moving forward alone. Chapter 3379. Pingyang Town, an ordinary border town. On this day, a group of strange people came to the town. These people were dressed differently from ordinary people in the town. Some of them did not even look like humans. They had sharp mouths and monkey cheeks and looked strong. Some of them had extraordinary auras. Some of them looked dignified. Some of them were carefree and unrestrained. This group of people had mysterious origins and unknown identities. However, they had no ill intentions towards Pingyang Town and did not disturb the people in the town. As time passed, the people of Pingyang Town became familiar with the existence of these people. They gradually got used to it. Occasionally, they would greet them when they bumped into each other. Among them, there was also a Taoist priest who knew how to tell stories. He set up a table in the town and held a folding fan in his hand as he told stories nonstop. This Taoist priest was eloquent and eloquent, coupled with the fact that the stories he told were wondrous worlds that the people of Pingyang Town had never heard of before. They were magnificent and soon attracted a group of people to sit around and listen to the story. In the stories of the storyteller, some people could use sword kinesis flight, some could ride on the clouds, and there were also people with great divine powers who could even burn the sky and boil the sea. Everyone did not know his name and background. They asked, but to no avail. They all called him a storyteller. This Taoist priest would tell stories in the town every day. Every time this happened, the people in the town who were free, be it adults or children, they would all rush over to listen. Spring came and autumn passed. Unknowingly, this Taoist priest had been telling stories in Pingyang Town for more than 5 years. This day, a large group of people in Pingyang Town rushed towards a direction. Without asking, they knew that the Taoist priest had started telling stories again. On this day, there were especially many people who came to listen to the story. That was because the Taoist priest's story was coming to an end. Piak! Everyone sat in the middle. The Taoist priest put down the wooden stick and opened his folding fan, saying that sacred King Samsara destroyed the trichiliocosm. Everything in the world and all living beings were turned into nothingness. This sacred king, Samsara, is too evil. A child said angrily. Another person also said the trichiliocosm was destroyed by him just like that. What happened after that? Did sacred king Araki Takashi die as well? What about Saint Blood Butterfly? Someone could not help but ask. The Taoist priest slowly sipped his tea and whetted his appetite. Then he slowly said, later on, the Taoist priest didn't say anything. This Araki Takashi, Saint King, detonated the Grand Beginning universe. In the dark and lonely universe, he deduced by himself and finally created the Grand Beginning universe that was even more ancient. And this absolute beginning universe has swallowed all the 3,000 destroyed worlds. becoming even more vast. Someone sighed and said, "But what's the use of that? Saint King Araki Takashi is the only one left in this absolute beginning universe. All his old friends are gone. How cruel is this to him?" Everyone nodded in agreement. The Taoist shook his head. Actually, after Sacred King Samsara destroyed the 3,000 worlds, he didn't destroy the Earth Book. Instead, he left all the souls in the Earth Book to Sacred King Araki Takashi. Everyone's expression froze, greatly surprised. The Taoist priest said, "So, with the souls of all the living beings in the 3,000 worlds, Sacred King Araki Takashi revived all the original living beings in the 3,000 worlds, including Araki Takashi's old friends. But how can the infinite calamity be resolved?" Someone suddenly asked. The Taoist priest smiled and said, "As the creator of the grand beginning universe, Sacred King Araki Takashi can naturally reestablish the laws in this new world. The root of the infinite calamity is the selfishness, and desire of the eternal. So, Sacred King Araki Takashi established one of the most important laws. Once a living being becomes a saint, they will lose their self-consciousness and become the great Tao. If you want eternal life, you have to give up all emotions. This way, the infinite calamity will be cut off from the root." Someone asked, "Then, what about Sacred King Araki Takashi? He has already become the most powerful existence in the grand beginning universe. Will he lose himself one day and become the second Sacred King Samsara? How is that possible?" Another person immediately refuted. "Sacred King Araki Takashi cares about the common people. He established the Wu Dao. With such a bold mind, how can he become Sacred King Samsara?" "That's not necessarily true." The first person said, "Didn't Sacred King Samsara want to establish a fair world in the beginning? He wanted to establish the 6 paths of reincarnation to reward the good and punish the evil?" The Taoist priest fell silent at the mention of this. After a while, the Taoist priest slowly said, "Sacred King Araki Takashi created the grand beginning universe, re-established the primordial world, established the 6 paths, and evolved all living beings. In the end, he cut off his self-consciousness and emotions, turning into the heavenly Tao to protect this new world." Everyone was shocked and cried out in surprise. Without self-consciousness and emotions, it meant that Sacred King Araki Takashi was no longer Sacred King Araki Takashi. That person's worries just now no longer existed. Under a heavenly Tao without self-consciousness and selfish thoughts, the 3,000 great Taos each had their own duties, and all living beings were equal. In a house in Pingyang Town, Su Zimo woke up slowly and turned over to get up from the bed. He sat in a daze for a long time. The confusion in his eyes gradually dissipated and he regained his clarity. However, he still did not get up. He seemed to have thought of something and was a little dazed. After a while, he stood up and pushed the door open. In the courtyard, under the peach blossom tree, a beautiful woman in a blood-red robe was standing there. She looked back and smiled gently. "You're awake?" "Yes." Su Zimo nodded. "You're the last one to wake up in our group." Dayu smiled. Su Zimo heard the faint noise coming from the town and asked, "What's going on outside?" Dayu smiled. "Lin Xuanji is telling a story over there. He's at a critical juncture now. Sacred King Samsara destroyed the 3,000 great worlds, and I'm guessing everyone is cursing him." "Sacred King Samsara!" Su Zimo opened his mouth slightly and hesitated. "What's wrong?" Dayu asked softly when she saw Su Zimo walk out of the room with a heavy heart. Su Zimo said, "There's a possibility that Sacred King Samsara destroyed the 3,000 great worlds to take revenge for Sacred King life. Coupled with the fact that he was already prepared to die, he no longer had any attachment to the 3,000 great worlds after the death of Sacred King life. However, I understood something earlier on. Perhaps there's another possibility." "What?" Daiyu asked. Su Zimo said, Sacred King Samsara has never changed. Right from the beginning, he wanted to realize his and Sacred King Life's ideals and build a world where all living beings are equal. However, he knew that the original 3,000 great worlds were already riddled with holes. Even if he controlled the 3,000 great worlds, he could not change the rules that had existed for many years. The only way to achieve equality in the new world is to destroy the old 3,000 great worlds and rebuild them. Chapter 3380. Hearing this, Daiyu said, So he chose to destroy the old world with his own hands and gave you the chance to create a new world. He also gave you the souls of the Trichiliocosm's races. Su Zimo nodded. Daiyu said, Back then, your Wu Dao's true body stayed with him in the Holy Ground land for tens of thousands of years. With his eyesight, nothing about Wu Dao's true body could be hidden from him. He didn't attack Wu Dao's true body, perhaps because of that moment. At the mention of this, Su Zimo sighed softly and said, He didn't attack Wu Dao's true body. There's another reason. This was also a scene that Wu Dao's true body saw after creating the absolute beginning universe and obtaining more power. Back in the Holy Ground land, when Sacred King Samsara mentioned Sacred King Life, he actually skipped an important piece of information. Sacred King Life's flesh and blood scattered and turned into the Trichiliocosm's human race. But Sacred King Samsara didn't mention the whereabouts of Sacred King Life's soul. It was impossible for a heavenly Tao Sacred King's soul to disappear without a trace. Even the Chaos Green Lotus had gone through several cycles of reincarnation. Daiyu looked enlightened and said, You mean, Su Zimo nodded and said, the birth of Wu Dao's true body has always been a mystery. I once wondered why a soul and self-will would be born just by creating Wu Dao and condensing the fruit of Wu Dao, until Wu Dao's true body created the absolute beginning. Only then did I know that it was the soul of Sacred King Life. She gave Wu Dao life. Sacred King Life's soul did not enter reincarnation. She had always been searching for her successor, one with great perseverance and courage, one with great wisdom, fearlessness, and a big heart. Only then would there be a glimmer of hope to change the Trichiliocosm, until Araki Takashi established the Tao and imparted martial arts to all living beings. Wu Dao was born. As for the Life Saint King, he bestowed martial arts with life. Saint King Samsara could see the shadow of Saint King Life on Wu Dao's body. However, Wu Dao's original body was not the Life Holy King. Therefore, at some point in time, Saint King Samsara would look at him strangely. Daiyu said, If that's the case, Chaos Qinglian and the Life Saint King work together to break the Trichiliocosm, not just to injure the 5 Taisha primordial spirits. The most important thing is to let the soul of the Life Saint King break free with the help of the 3,000 broken worlds. It's precisely because of this that a variant that has jumped out of the 3 dimensions and isn't part of the 5 elements was created. Su Zimo replied, Only by obtaining the power to break away from the 3,000 worlds would it be possible to create a new world, Daiyu said. Saint King Samsara naturally knew about Saint King Life's intentions. That's why he gave you the chance to create a new world. He trusts you so much because of the Life Saint King. Su Zimo heard this. However, he shook his head and said, Samsara trusts Saint King Life, but he doesn't necessarily trust me. Do you still remember what Saint King Samsara said to the Demon Lord before the 3,000 worlds were destroyed? Daiyu nodded. Su Zimo said, With the Demon Lord's cultivation, he can't threaten Saint King Samsara at all. However, Saint King Samsara's words to him at that time seemed a little unnecessary. I think that Saint King Samsara's words might have been meant for me. People's hearts change. He was worried that after I created a new world, I would be infatuated with the power and status of the Lord of all souls, the ruler of the 3 dimensions, and lose myself. That's why he said those words to remind me. Daiyu was silent. Fortunately, Su Zimo made his choice in the end. After a moment, Daiyu smiled and said, This is just your guess. I'm afraid only Samsara himself knows what he's thinking. Yes. Su Zimo also smiled. Let's go, it's time to leave. Dai Yu waved and said, Everyone's waiting for you. Su Zimo stepped forward and walked out of the courtyard hand in hand with Dai Yu, arriving on the streets of Pingyang town and looking at everything around him. Su Zimo was in a daze. These were all created by Wu Dao's original body in the new 3,000 worlds, based on his memories. Most of them were familiar, but there were some differences as well. A series of hurried running sounds came from behind, getting closer and closer. Hurry up, the storyteller is almost done with his story. I was so busy that I forgot. I don't know if I can make it in time. A young girl and a young man were running towards them. That voice sounded familiar. Su Zimo looked over instinctively. As the girl ran past the two of them, she turned around inadvertently and her gaze met with Su Zimo's. Both Su Zimo and the girl were slightly stunned. Instinctively, the girl stopped in her tracks and looked at Su Zimo with a hint of confusion in her eyes. Mengqi, what's wrong? It'll be too late if you dawdle. The young man tugged at her sleeves and urged. Oh, the girl snapped out of her trance and ran off hurriedly. What happened to you earlier on? The young man asked as he ran. Shaking her head, the girl said, Nothing. It's just that I seem to have seen the green-robed man somewhere before. Why don't I remember? The young man teased. You didn't see him in your dreams, did you? Humph. The girl harumphed softly. You don't say. I did have a dream previously, and I even joined an immortal sect. Tisk. The young man was disdainful as well. What's the big deal about that? I even dreamt that I could pluck the stars and roam the four seas. Instantly, the girl was a little disappointed. However, that dream wasn't very good. Su Zimo smiled in relief as he watched the young man and girl leave. The two of them walked side by side for a while more and saw a rather large residence not far away. A man and a woman stood at the entrance, looking at a child who was slowly learning to walk with doting expressions. Brother! When he saw the man, Su Zimo's eyes reddened as he murmured softly. The Su Hong before him no longer had the hideous scar on his face and was already married with a child. As though he sensed something, Su Hong looked over in Su Zimo's direction. When he saw Su Zimo and Meng Qi, Su Hong nodded slightly as a greeting before attracting his gaze. It was clear that he did not recognize Su Zimo. Although Wu Dao's true body created the primordial world and evolved all living beings, the billions of souls experienced such changes and reincarnations. Not everyone's memories could be preserved. It's actually quite good that brother has a new life. Let's not disturb them. Xiaoning's voice sounded from behind. Su Zimo nodded. Su Hong had endured way too much pressure and pain in his life. Perhaps it was a form of relief for him to not have those memories. Su Zimo turned back. Night Spirit stood beside Xiaoning. A group of people walked over. All of them were old friends. Monkey, Tiger, Lin Zhan, Fairy Linglong, Hakadojin, Longran, Mingzhan, Momo, Nianqi, Kitsune, Yen Beichen walked over with a woman. It was Qin Pianran. Everyone looked at Su Zimo, and the smiles in their eyes deepened. Finally, they could not help but burst into laughter without caring about the gazes of others. There was nothing more joyous than the reunion of these old friends. When he heard the laughter, the storyteller happened to put down the wooden block. He surveyed the surroundings and cupped his fists. This story is over. Let's meet again in the pugilistic world. I missed a lot and haven't heard it yet. Someone could not help but grumble. The Taoist priest casually threw down a thick, ancient book and said, Everything I've said is inside. Take it and read it. With that said, the Taoist priest pushed through the crowd and ran toward Su Zimo and the others. Everyone rushed forward and picked up the ancient book. Someone shouted at the back view of the Taoist priest, Hey, storyteller, why doesn't this book have a name? The Taoist priest slapped his forehead. This ancient book was originally written by the previous storyteller of Enigma Palace because of Araki Takashi's establishment of the Tao and imparting martial arts to all living beings. The previous storyteller once said that he did not write the name of the biography because he did not know what Su Zimo's future accomplishments would be like. If he was unable to complete this biography, he could only rely on the next storyteller. The biography was passed down to Lin Xuanji and continued to be recorded. However, the name of the biography was still blank. The Taoist priest was in a hurry to meet everyone and could not be bothered to think about it. He then said, "I don't know how to write it either. I'll leave it to you guys." Everyone was slightly disappointed. After listening for so long, it ended just like that. Everyone felt a sense of regret and disappointment in their hearts. After taking a few steps, the Taoist priest paused and turned back to look at the people. However, before the holy king Araki Takashi in the book transformed into the heavenly Tao, he left behind a sentence in this world. No one in this world can live forever, and it's the same for me. In the cycle of the heavenly Tao, there are ups and downs. I only hope that the Wu Tao of the world will prosper, and everyone will be like dragons. His righteousness will last forever. Some of them were emotional when they heard that. Some of them were already tearing up. Wu Tao was never a single person. Instead, he was a group of people. He was a civilization and a belief. More than that, he was an indomitable spirit. Even if night falls, as long as Wu Tao's spirit is not extinguished, he will become a spark that will illuminate the mountains and rivers one day. The holy king Araki Takashi had already become a supreme existence that surpassed all living beings and the heavenly Tao. He could be said to be the ruler of the three realms. However, he did not miss it. Instead, he chose to establish the cycle of reincarnation, open up the primordial world, and rebuild order. He returned the trichiliocosm to the living beings of the 10,000 races. Only then did he give all living beings in the world the chance to be like dragons. I heard the storyteller mention a kind of divination before. Using 9, seeing a group of dragons without a leader is auspicious. Does it also have the same meaning? When one cultivates to that level, he is already the ruler of the three realms. No one can shake his position. However, it is the most difficult to restrain one's heart and give up everything. The holy king Araki Takashi transformed into the heavenly Tao and his soul dissipated. However, he left behind the most precious thing to inspire future generations and pass it down for generations. That is the eternal and indestructible spirit of Wu Tao. Storyteller, a child, seemed to have thought of something. He squeezed out of the crowd and chased after the storyteller for a few steps. He panted slightly and looked at the storyteller's back as he left. He shouted, "Your book is called The Eternal Holy King, okay?" "Okay." The storyteller replied with a smile. With his back facing the crowd, he waved goodbye and walked side by side with the people in front of him. They gradually disappeared at the end of the road. The book ended.